We're in the middle of a heat wave, but you need to close the pool today. No joke, it's a serious matter. You need someone to block the ladder. Had to slap a bitch right in the face. She was bleeding all over the place. Now the water may test positive. Best close the pool if you want to live. Pool's closed. Pool's closed for today. Pool's closed. Pool's closed through the age. Summer is here, can't get any hotter, but we can't swim because there's blood in the water. Don't swim if you don't wanna get AIDS. Don't swim unless you're already gay. Pool's closed. Pool's closed for today. Pool's closed. Pool's closed through the age. Block the ladder, 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 block the ladder. You don't wanna get AIDS, bitch. I cut a bitch on the water slide, stuck in the tube cause her ass was too wide. Now there's AIDS at the water park, more dangerous than swimming with sharks. Pool's closed. Pool's closed for today. Pool's closed. Pool's closed through the age. Pool's closed. Pool's closed for today. Pool's closed. Pool's closed through the age. Block the ladder, 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 block the ladder. You don't wanna get AIDS, bitch. You don't wanna get AIDS, bitch.
I stay in my cave with my old English butler. I have really cool technology. I've got a penchant for justice, and I'm delivering his heart tonight. I'm only hoping the skyline is clear, so I can see my signal, and hopefully the traffic isn't too bad. I'm roaming the streets with my eyes out looking for crimes. I'll pulverize petty thieves with mental issues who have fallen on hard times. But fear ye not, I don't go too far. I've got a strict code, I'm a billionaire. With parental issues, I'll practice my karate on the mentally unstable. I've got a strict code, I'll leave you in a vegetated state with my trust fund kung fu. If you are struggling with mental health issues, I'll likely beat you up. I've got a strict code, I'll leave you in a vegetated state with my trust fund kung fu. If you are struggling with mental health issues, I'll likely beat you up. Ah, what do we have here? Some Gotham retrobate scumbag short, changing a taxi driver, not on my watch, pal. This crime needs justice, and I'm delivering it hard tonight. I hope he doesn't leave whilst I find a parking spot. Old man, give that taxi driver that extra dollar. What you think this is? I'll pulverize petty thieves with mental issues who have fallen on hard times.
Oh, terrible. I'm live. And yeah. Okay. So, what are we doing tonight? Well, I don't know. I want to have a wild card night where we could do anything from play gotcha slop to watching some videos, saying some racial slurs. We could do whatever we want. It's a Friday. It's Saturday night. Let's have some fun. Since streams usually start off with no one else here, which is fine. Not really expecting engagement. I am looking forward to start though on some videos. And a video I do want to touch before I get off sidetracked was Dankula released a video 10 days ago that I have not touched called Dune Caused 9/11. And that begs my question. How the fuck do you figure that much? Truth be told, I am curious. So, it would be wise to watch a video, just to start off, on this evening. And if you wish to say any racial slurs in chat, go ahead. I have no qualms with that. Fuck off. Flabby, good night. Yeah, fuck off. Nesna, I don't know what the fuck that is. Kick. Oh, I love Kick with all of its bots. They're junk. Great. Anyways. Could Dune really cause 9/11? By Count Dankula. Oh boy. I love his conspiracy videos, but mainly though, anything to do with 9/11 is often, to me, something that's of an interesting issue because I think as people are getting older, they're starting to realize that not just people who were there around to observe the actual attack on television or in person would have feelings about it, but there's people who are born after the fact, like myself, who we understood and observed 9/11 through post-media, and media and post are everything, and it became somewhat of a gag of its absurdity, and as more things come out about it, and there's more revelations around conspiracy around it, which once again, conspiracy theories are often 5 steps away from just being the actual fact, more often than not, you start to realize that maybe, just maybe, things like this become a subject of less comedy, not per se of the victim's end, which is, of course, the tragic part of 9/11, but the absurdity of it all becomes more so of a joke to people nowadays. I mean, Christ alive, I think people are actually learning about the 9/11 attacks just mainly through memes nowadays at this point. Because schools will often just gloss over entirely nowadays.
Now, I know that this sounds absolutely crazy, but hear me out. This video is so seriously semi-serious, and I demand that you take it semi-half seriously.
Why the fuck are you donning a fur coat and a... I want to say it's a new Ushanka, but I know it's not a new Ushanka. What the hell?
But basically, I have a theory that Frank Herbert, the writer and creator of the very popular Dune series, which inspired a lot of modern sci-fi, could also have inadvertently inspired 9/11.
Now, okay, that's a statement to behold, but I'm not sure if I've actually really gone into Dune at all. Well, actually, no, I never did, because I tried. I watched Dune. I didn't read Dune, unfortunately. Well, a few sci-fi novels or like mainline sci-fi series, I never actually read the novels behind. Dune never per se interested in me. I did read plenty of early sci-fi, of course, a lot of Asimov. But when I was a kid, I was a Star Wars geek. I was a Star Wars kid. Disney, of course, killed that for me in every way, shape, or form. But I was a Star Wars kid, so that was my cup of tea. Star Trek, not so much. I guess maybe I was too normcore, but I like Old Republic and Clone Wars. That was my era. That was my choice of Star Wars and to stick in the timeline with. As I've gotten older, I've gotten more into the post original trilogy, where it was the actual continuation stories before Kathleen Kennedy retconned that. I got more into that as I've gotten older, just because the actual talent behind writers to make novels and comics and graphic novels, it's just a continuation of the story. It was more than just cash grab. It was not even a cash grab at all. I mean, Lucas gave the rights to say, hey, you guys are fans, make whatever you can out of this, and they made a beautiful universe post Fall of the Empire. And funny enough, a lot of the Empire did stick around in these novels and comics, but Dune for me, I couldn't really get into it. Yes, I know all the jokes. I know about to walk without rhythm, you won't attract the worm. You know, don't walk with rhythm, you won't attract the worm. Right? Basically that. I know the jokes. I know the war cry. I know the new movies too. It's just I just never got into it. Oh, I also know the sandworms too. That's another thing too. Yeah, I know I'm really fucking outing myself as a norm. It's kind of like normcore for the sense of guys who like Dune, but I don't know. Some sci-fi with a lot of the mysticism just does not interest me at all. I prefer more mechanical sci-fi over
Please leave
magic.
a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Spring is coming, and you would think that would come with a series of lovely sounds like birds chirping and lambs baaing, but
spring usually brings me allergies. That and terrible luck usually.
I don't care about any of that. My favourite music is starting to come out now. Lots and lots of new tunes with the sweet hook of this summer, and I want to be able to headbang to it with the highest fidelity possible.
Oh no, not Raycon.
No! Sponsor, Raycon.
Okay, I say no because of how many years we've gone on with these Raycon ads, but truth be told, if the company's sticking around, they're still sponsoring YouTubers I like, then fine. I'm fully on board with Raycon doing their thing. It's just, I just find them a little bit pricey.
To that end, they've sent me this nifty little doodad. How does it work, you might ask? Well, as a great man once said, bone. Raycon's bone conduction headphones don't actually go inside of your ears. Instead, you get your sweet beats beamed into your head through good vibrations in your bones. Brian Wilson speaks of this, and Raycon will be giving you the excitations because you better believe that these things provide premium quality at just half the price of other brands.
Huh. I don't need stock footage of guys just doing some weird aerobics, but I think I'll bite.
And as great as that quality is, these bad boys keep me in tune with the outside world as I go about my day, since my ears are free to listen to things like the traffic I'm about to walk into, I suppose, or the screaming...
Why walk in traffic when you can just drive into traffic? Just play chicken with oncoming cars.
biomass of Glasgow asking if I have a lighter or a cigarette or a quid, and then when I say no, the fact that they are IP68 waterproof and dustproof will be very, very handy for when I get tackled to the ground in anger by some junkie, and then I have to grapple and tussle my lighter away from them before filling my special meter up enough to unlock my finishing move, stand up and walk away. And since there are no buds to worry about, the bone conduction headphones will stay nice.
Yeah, what's going on? What's going on, my dear brother? What's going on, brother? How are you?
Comfy and secure around my head. The bone conduction headphones are perfect for refreshing your routine this spring. And
I could not. I'm sorry. I actually had a pair of wireless, semi-wireless headsets. Not like this. Cooking shit. Oh, okay. What you cooking? But I had a cooking, okay. You know, hot chicken, tell me what you're missing, kissing on the man while you're working in the kitchen. Is that what you're cooking or what? What I was saying though is I used to have a semi-wired pair of headphones, which were earbuds, but they were the skull candy ones that had the wire that ran down to the actual USB pod and battery in the middle of the connector. Sausage and rice with cabbage. Okay, that's not a terrible meal. And they used to just like dangle. they were good for what they were, but the more intensive my exercise became, the less I started using them because they kept falling on my ears.
And Raycon's
And eventually the wire did get frayed and pulled and broke over time, but that's a different story.
30-day happiness guarantee means that there's no downside to seeing how you fit in with their 3 million other happy customers. So, click the link in the description box down below, or scan the QR code on the screen, or go to buyraycon.com/dankulabc to get 20% off. And a big thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. What
the fuck?
was 9/11?
An event that changed the world in such a way that we've yet to truly come out of it. In the sense that we'll never go back to the way things were because we fucking gave up privacy rights, security rights, everything to the US, to federal governments and globalists, but also it was an event that somehow equally made us less aware, and at the end, a day where Jews dance. Thank you. Thanks, Brotherhood. That's, truth be told, that is another thing I must recall as well. A day where $4 billion went, was it $4 billion or $6 billion went missing the day prior to. I mean, just a lot of weird coincidences that happened. But yeah, no, 9/11. Once again, the conspiracy theories don't exactly go after the victims of 9/11 because they always prelude of what happened prior to 4.5 billion that happened before 9/11. That's why people forget about the conspiracy theories about 9/11. That's why, you know, you get the average person that wants to shill, like, how could you make conspiracy theories about? It's not degrading the fact that over 3,000 people died. It's the fact that the circumstances that led to such an attack just fucking were weird before it, and then that led to a massive tragedy, a mass loss of life. Also too, there was who took their days off before the attacks happened, which workers didn't come into work that day randomly. Why did Tower 7 fall? I don't know. Why was the Pentagon being audited before that, and then about $2 trillion went missing, and all of a sudden, whoopsie, I mean, just that whole wing just got fucking got decimated in a plane being struck. And why did we suddenly, and I think the only genuine part of 9/11 that kind of made sense of it all, of the clusterfuck that it was the fourth plane, which went down over Pennsylvania, because the hijackers got taken back, or basically fought with control with the passengers. I mean, that's the only one I can think that actually had some semblance of sense to it, in terms of there's no underlying conspiracy to any of that. That actually just fucking happened. But also the main thing is, like, why were most of the hijackers from Saudi Arabia? Explain that one to me. Like, I get the invasion of Iraq happened afterwards. I get we're going to Afghanistan for the Taliban, but why were most of them from Saudi Arabia? Why were most of them on the CIA watch list? And the more questions you ask, the more you don't want to ask, the more you get put on a list. The plane was anti-Semitic. Thank you, Brotherhood. But yeah, no, the more you just talk about 9/11, it's like, people are going to hear this, and they're going to either associate me with pulling a Hassan here, right? And or, you know, they're going to have people that are going to try to make like an expose conspiracy video. Oh my God, there's anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But it's like, there's just a lot of shit involved with the leading up to the attacks that just don't make sense at all. And that's just me just touching on the surface level of the shit that I know of. And I don't even want to go into detail of it. It's just, fuck me. But how did Dune cause 9/11? Because I'm actually curious. Because when there's genuine conspiracy theories that just turn out to be true, because, like, I mean, how many fucking years was Alex Jones talking about Epstein's Island, the whole cabal and everything behind the scenes? And of course, he went to, what was that one grotto he went to? I don't remember his name. But all the shit that Alex Jones did, and then people kept calling him crazy, you know, how violent games, yeah, exactly. But then most of those conspiracy theories, of course, you know, become true. And it's something that we've known for years, and they just become true. But then you get cases like, where the only fun thing I like about some theories that they're so absurd that, yes, they're often unfortunate ways and kind of plants to keep people distracted from the main point of, hey, there's a lot of questionable shit going on. But equally, too, it's funny to hear how did Dune predict or cause 9/11 is often one of the most funniest things, like just as a party starter sentence.
An excuse for forever wars, an inside job, a giant insurance scam. It was a bunch of different things. But the main thing that it was...
And I also want to make it aware, oh yeah, that's one area where Jones recorded them doing some satanic rap. Yeah, that's one around the statue of Moloch. But I'm going to say this before we press the video too, because Dankula's been on his fucking tirades with American interventionism, and I'm partial and part impartial. There's off occasions where he's a broken clock and he's right twice a day about these events going on, whether it be Venezuela or parts of Venezuela or parts of now Iran. However, by the same token too, Dankula's been spurging out because mainly he's in this weird phase of he wants monarchy to return for some fucking reason, and he's also trying to be hyper nostalgic over the days of the old British Empire. We have to do it because everyone else is too chicken shit to do anything, sort of like the whole Iran thing. Exactly. People want to keep the status quo, and just things get worse and worse and worse and worse. But equally, too, there is a lot of shit and qualms I have with Iran, because, I mean, it's not a cause of... It's both not a cause of world police, it's not a cause of a complete virtuous mission, but neither is it a complete Goy going to war for Israel situation. It's a mix. It's somewhere in the middle, but there's virtues and there's sins of it all. Right? I mean, that's just me looking at it objectively. I'm fully on board for a regime change of Iran, because funny enough, I do know some Iranians that do want to go back the moment shit happens and changes over. They want to leave. They want to go home. They want to go back to fucking Iran. They've actually said it and how many times over, they were considered political refugees here, the ones I know, they fucking want to go back right away. They don't want to stick around in Leafland. They don't want to fucking be here. They want to go home. But by that same token, there's also a questionability of, is it going to just be another pawn to play for a forever war or territorial gain or political geosway from both the Saudis and Israelis? I don't buy any single story on the matter. Right? I have my respect for the men on the ground. I'm talking about the United States military. I have complete respect for most of the gentlemen, the guys over there. Just the geopolitical matter behind everything else is what makes me cock an eyebrow at the whole situation too. There's pluses, there's minuses, there's a lot of shit going on. And it's only really a matter of hindsight will be 20/20 at the end of it all, but I hate living life in the hindsight, you know? Then again, I'm not serving, so I don't want to let this go into an accidental tirade or accidental rant where I seemingly come across as some fucking Turk, screaming at his computer and living off daddy's millions. Right? I don't want to seem like that type of jagoff.
Was a suicide bombing carried out by Muslim terrorists.
Now,
let's have a look at one of my all-time favourite ever subjects, the history of suicide bombings.
Yes! Oh, fuck yeah!
The very first documented suicide bombing that we have in history was actually done by a Russian.
Fucking Slavs. Fucking Slavs, man. I don't know what to say. Of the collective that is the white race, supposedly, the Slavs are, well, they're an interesting bunch. I will say that much. They are interesting. I'm going to give them that. I unironically think some of the Slavs give credence to the fucking theory of Yakub sometimes. Because the shit they do often makes you wonder, it's like, we came from the same continent?
In 1881, a Russian anarchist group called People's Will
Oh,
planned to
great.
assassinate Tsar Alexander II of Russia.
Right.
One member of the group actually threw a bomb at the Tsar's carriage and it detonated, but the Tsar was still alive.
Right.
And that was not the point of the entire exercise. So one of the assassins, named Ignatiy Grinevitsky, rushed B towards the carriage while holding a nitroglycerin bomb and detonated it when he got close. He
Oh, shit.
killed himself alongside several bystanders, but he also successfully killed the Tsar. Bomb planted, terrorists win.
Fuck. And that makes me beg the question too, right? I'm probably not the first one to think of this. I hope I don't get put on a fucking list for saying this, but has anyone considered doing a claymore, like one like this type of like mission with a claymore? Because like, I gotta wonder too, because like I know claymore charges. You have the side that faces towards your target, right? My question is the backblast on a claymore enough to kill you? If you are wearing a proper plated tactical vest, like a level 4 tactical, is it enough to kill you? Because at that point, it's pro strats to put a claymore on your body and just run at someone. Because I'm wondering, is that a fucking thing that someone's tried yet? Because I wouldn't put it past some buttfuck jihadists to do that in the middle of the fucking Afghanistan, just to try it out. Because like fucking Uwo's Lab, I love Uwo's Lab on Twitch. He fucking made a claymore out of airbags, and I'm like, yeah, airbags can fire off pretty fast, but I don't think they have the velocity of a claymore. So my question is the backblast on it enough to kill you from the shock, or can you survive fucking a self-strap claymore? Because I'm genuinely curious. That is something I would have to ask, but I don't want to search up. It's like, I don't want to get fucking H250. Welcome. We're talking about suicide bombers and claymores being used as pro strats in combat. How are you doing?
The next suicide bombing that we have after that was the 1927 Bath disaster.
Oh, see, it goes from funny and then 42 children up. Talk about a whiplash.
Which was done by an American. And it was the first ever suicide.
Yeah, leave it. Attaboy, US, USA. I'm not gonna make the joke about the school there.
Suicide bombing carried out on US soil. Long story short, a man called Andrew Cahill blamed his local township for raising the taxes in order for them to build a new school. And this increase
Yeah, it happens. Tub incidents.
in taxes pretty much financially ruined him. And he got so fucking furious about it that he filled the basement of the new school with explosives and blew the entire building up, with himself and around 38 children dying in the blast.
Or mixed baking soda with actual. No, okay. There's stuff we learn in chemistry class that like I get it. There's the anarchist cookbook, which is mostly a crock of shit, and you got the government issued during the Vietnam War, which is the supplemental IED handbook. But ideally, once again, I know people, and it's mainly because if you're sponging it with the intent to do stuff of, hey bro, here's how you make napalm, here's how you make this, here's how you make, ammonium nitrate, bro. It's like, if you do basic chemistry classes, you can learn to make these substances in high school chemistry or some supplemental chemistry courses. However, it's because you're also taught that, hey, just because these substances have explosive or dangerous uses doesn't mean they're always used for purposes of a violent intent. You can use, once again, fucking ammonium nitrate as a perfect fertilizer. It's dangerous. You understand the dangers if you produce it, understand it, study it. For Christ's sake, I'm taking gas refitting, right? I understand that there's a lot of dangerous shit I am playing with, but I also understand chemistry of, hey, here's how we handle it safely. Also, never pee in a clean toilet. Oh, I know about that one for the ammonium. What I'm saying is that generally, if you understand chemistry, like I get people trying to make a big faux pas, but especially once again after the subject of the video after 9/11, with the NSA especially and the overreach of power. It does beg the question, though, is it terribly wrong just to understand basic chemistry as well? Because it really depends on the intent of the person. And there's a questionability of understanding and the right to knowledge, right? The right to understand, the right to learn. I feel like there's a lot of overreach and overstepping boundaries there, right? And again, that's just me. I'm talking to the wind. I'm talking to the void. I'm 25 years too late to bring up these talking points, but you get what I'm saying, right? Just because you have the knowledge or understand the knowledge or the knowledge is available of how to make certain compounds, it doesn't mean you're going to use said compounds for dangerous uses. It's, once again, instant until proven guilty. More often than not, we understand that, hey, these compounds have multiple uses. Right. I just sometimes question the overreach of things.
I mean, I hate taxis just as much as the next guy.
What the fuck is that? Please step on me, daddy.
But
yeah,
that
is fucked up. Yeah, yeah. Like I'm fully on board for the lowering of taxes, but why did you need to blow up 41 children with you?
That's taken it a little bit too far. Then after that, we have the Japanese kamikaze pilots of World War II, Tenno Heka.
With great powers comes great responsibility, Spider-Man, chemical wizard.
Banzai.
Hello, Sharma. We're talking about suicide bombings. How are you?
Into aircraft carriers that were not made of wood and bamboo like theirs were.
Okay, so with the kamikaze missions, there's a couple aspects that people will forget, because yes, the most absurd. Okay, when you think of kamikaze, you're thinking typically of aircraft being piloted into ships, right? Or Vanguard just finished my stream. Didn't realize that you were in boss services last night. Well, I'm always in boss. I'm sometimes in boss's server. I mainly just hang around Mabel and boss and Brotherhood every so often. But as I was saying though, is that what people often forget about the kamikaze missions is that the concept of kamikaze was actually nothing new. In fact, it's something that pilots in a rage, a fit of war, will. And it's not just with the Japanese. A lot of happened quite through different nations throughout the war. Pilots would, if they were being shot down and burning down, and they couldn't bail. They would just aim their aircraft at a target and make do with the literal flying bomb that was their aircraft. I can think of cases throughout the war, but Japan in particular did use their pilots would, in a last-ditch effort to deliver the payload, would kamikaze. Saw you pop on YouTube, so welcome, Rue. How are you doing, Rue? Pilots would kamikaze even earlier in the war. I mean, once again, during Midway, there was that case of that G3M2 Betty bomber, twin-engine bomber, attempting to kamikaze the Enterprise, which of course was shot down by one of the I remember his name. He was an Italian guy, but he was one of the tail gunners. Once again, they reenacted them in the Midway movie, but cases like those weren't terribly uncommon. Anyway, I gotta go. Might come back later. Good to hear, Drew, and I'll see you later, Dr. Love. But what I'm talking about though is that when the kamikaze missions started in full in mid to late 1944, with actual squadrons formulated of kamikaze pilots, that became more the main staple, because that's the most common version of kamikaze, of to fly, being up old aircraft loaded with bombs and with low ammunition to crash them into the ship with low experienced pilots. But people often forget that. I keep forgetting the Enterprise was a real ship and not a spaceship. Yeah, I mean, considering it was one of the premieres of the U.S. naval fleet for how long? The first Enterprise became so famous that it just kept on that name, or the first Enterprise aircraft carrier, because it wasn't the first Enterprise in U.S. naval history. But then the Japanese had different forms of kamikaze, which I'm not sure if Danko was going to cover, because there was the second form of aerial kamikaze they had was the Oka, the cherry blossom, or the Baka bomb, as the Americans called it, so the idiot bomb. The Oka was a piloted solid fuel state rocket loaded with about 2,000 pounds of munitions that would fly straight into a ship. at approximately 650 miles per hour. Now, it was made of wood and had very simple flight controls. And when I say 3-stage rocket, it had 3 thrusters. It was a 3-stage solid fuel rocket thrust. So you'd fire off one by one after one another. You wouldn't fire them all off at once. You would have to do that. And sometimes it had enough punching power that sometimes the bomb would explode. The Oka would go through one end of the ship and out the other and then explode in the water, depending on the size of the ship. Not terribly successful because a lot of the bombers carrying the Oka bomb would end up being shot down on the way to the target. The other one, this isn't the history about Tora. I know. The other one that I know of is the submarine kamikaze, which is basically just manned torpedoes being piloted and floated in through the water to a ship with very simple controls, of course, and exploding, which I don't get the Japanese of why they believe that the accuracy would improve if they killed themselves in the process, but hey-ho. And then there was, of course, people think of bonsai attacks for the infantry, but they also had the kamikaze punji bombs, which are the ones that would run at the tanks with massive, like, either strapped on their body vests or stick bombs. They would run it at tanks with and end up killing them in the process. And the scary thing about that is that people don't realize that between the bombing raids on Japan, they were preparing school children to carry out these bombs with a new one that basically they would teach them how to go underneath the tank and explode from the bottom. So they're getting ready to get teenage boys ready to defend the mainland by blowing themselves up. Of course, the invasion of Japan never actually happened, so we are very much grateful for that did not occur. Once again, the same tactics that the Russians did with dogs and some soldiers as well. The Russians were not astray to using suicide bombs as well during the war. They weren't to do that. In fact, funny enough, even the Germans later in the war did have some suicide. Only about 3-4 attacks were done with suicide bombs on bridges, but they ended up being failures outright. And then there was what people call the German kamikazes, which was not the case, was the Sonderkommando Elba, which was a group of pilots mostly comprised of boys between the ages of 15 and 17 that flew low performance, basically just ready to be scrapped Bf-109s and ram them to American bombers as a terror campaign. So they would call off bombing raids enough for the Germans to prepare to build more jets. The thing is, though, is that the 109s, the reason why they weren't considered kamikazes, especially by the survivors of the Elba squadrons, is because they were given a 20% survival rate to crash the plane and then bail out. And as one of the pilots said in post, he said, to us, 20% was 50%, and 50% was pretty much a guaranteed survival rate to return home, because when we were 17 and 15, we were both filled with fury of seeing our homes burning, and I mean, a lot of them came from Dresden too, so if you look into that, there's a lot of psychology and methodology to their madness behind that. And of course, when you're young, full of testosterone like that, there is a certain fury that you would take to the skies with you to do something so rash in the defense of the fatherland.
Because fucking brokies. And they did it because they absolutely were the Emperor's top guy, and they were more than happy to lay their lives down to defend
something.
I don't know, molesting schoolgirls on trains or something. And they even had these things called lunge mines, where they would again
there it is, the lunge mines,
scream banzai and then charge at tanks with essentially a big bomb on the end of a stick, blowing themselves up and hopefully taking the tank with them.
Yep.
Then after that, in 1953, we have Donzel McGray, another American. And while he was literally standing in the courtroom during proceedings against his ex-wife,
what?
He stood up and unbuttoned
dude's fucking rock.
His jacket, revealing a bunch of dynamite strapped to his chest, and then he yelled, "Look what's going to happen here!"
Dude's fucking rock.
And he blew himself up. Hey, guess what? It'd have been funnier if he asked the person next to him to pull his fucking finger.
Rodney Dangerfield, ladies and gents. Oh, I loved watching old Rodney Dangerfield when I was younger. Oh, man.
His ex-wife and her lawyer and a bunch of other people were injured, but fortunately Dunzell was the only person killed.
No shit.
Then after that, in 1959, we have yet another American called Paul Harold blowing up yet another school. I have no idea what the fuck is going on with Americans, but those fuckers really hate schools. But
Okay.
anyway, he did this because he was trying to enroll his son in the school, but he couldn't provide the necessary documentation to make it happen. So he said
Schools are evil.
that he would pop off home and get the documents
Sometimes.
and then come back the next day.
All the time.
But instead, he came back with a briefcase full of fucking dynamite and detonated it in
Oh, that's fucking brutal. Oh.
the school, killing
That's gnarly footage, though.
not just himself, but also his own son that he was trying to enroll in the school, as well as some other students and a teacher.
Oh.
This one is probably the dumbest fucking one so far. Oh, you need a birth certificate for my son to come into the school? I mean, I could just pop right home right now and get that and it would fix everything.
Yeah.
Or I could just blow everyone the fuck up. I mean, look, again, I also hate
He did come with the documents. I mean, yeah.
obviously just as much as the next guy. But fucking hell, man, just fill out the fucking form.
Yeah, just Jesus.
Then in 1962, we have Thomas G. Doty, who blew up Continental Airlines Flight 11 by using sticks of dynamite that he had hidden inside of his suitcase.
Oh.
In an attempt to blow the plane up and make it look like a crash so that he could collect a bunch of life insurance policies that he had just taken out on himself so that all of that money could go to his family because he was facing financial ruin.
You know, there are ways to do that without taking a bunch of other people down with you. My brother in Christ, not like you should, but like, that's just selfish on your part.
He killed himself and all 45 people on board.
Yeah, what a
The
dick.
FBI, however, very, very quickly figured out that all of this was just part of a big insurance scam and all of the policies were cancelled and his family
It need to be flashy. Go big or go home.
got absolutely nothing.
Yeah, good job, Jagoff. Good job.
Womp womp. Then we have
Don't. Oh.
a huge gap all the way up to 1981 where we had the Yanquan Theatre bombing in China, where
Here we go.
a man named Gao Haiping got dumped by his girlfriend and
No! 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 Oh! Fuck! Oh! Yan Quang, yes! I saw my girl who went out with. I fucking can't do a Chinese. We can't do a Chinese stereotypical voice. Oh, my girlfriend. Oh, she went to. Fuck. Saw my girl. Saw my girl. The American white guy. It is over. Billions must die. Christ, man. I get your girl dumped you for a white guy with a little bit of emotion, but come on.
he wanted to kill her and carry out a mass killing while he was at it. So he invited his ex-girlfriend to come and see a movie with him so that they could bury the hatchet. He arrived at the theatre and he didn't turn up.
No shit.
So he just kind of went, oh man, and just detonated the bomb anyway. He detonated the bomb anyway, killing himself and 32 other people.
Jeez.
Now, the very, very important thing that a lot of you probably noticed from all of these bombings is that not a single one was carried out by a Muslim. Not a single one. In fact, all suicide bombings at this point in history had all been carried out by crazy Americans, crazy Asians, and a single Russian. So at this point in history, there has not been one single suicide bombing carried out by a single Muslim. And it's not like Muslims haven't always been absolutely fucking mental.
Yeah.
They've been carrying out atrocities for their fanatical and wrong
Thank you.
beliefs for centuries by this point. But none of those atrocities involved suicide bombing.
Correct.
But all of that changed in December of 1981 with the Iraqi embassy bombing in Beirut.
Right. I don't know if it was this one or an attack later on in the early 80s that happened, but sometime or another, there was a case where there was an attack that led to a complete drop-off in airline traffic. Is this Falco? I don't know yet. Just hang on. There was a drop-off in airline traffic because of said attack. And my grandparents did what was called terrorist tourism, where basically after a terrorist attack, they will go to said nation for the discounted prices and first-class accommodations because every hotel and airline is hurting for business because of said event. And I think they went to Egypt for a fucking steal because of said attacks. And basically got like 75% off on the first class on the way there, and then like for first class accommodations and for visiting the Pyramid of Giza. So silver lining, I guess.
Where a Shia Islamist terror group named Al-Dawa loaded up a truck with 100 kilograms of explosives. I can bench that. And
I fucking love it. Not gonna lie, considering all the stuff I know about modern planes in the Middle East, I would rather not risk the flight. This was in the 80s, man. This is before they started using aircraft as their weapons. This is before they got smart enough for that. This is when they were still using mostly ground and individual bombs.
plowed it right into the Iraqi embassy in Lebanon.
So 225. I'm actually curious. 100 kilogram bomb, so 100 kilograms. What's 100 kilograms to? I'm curious. 100 kg, 2 pounds. I need to use the better fraction. I need to use the better equation for this. 220 pounds. So that's a 2-plate bench. Yeah, okay. That's that. Okay, very impressive, Dankula. You did a 2-plate bench. My PR, once again, my single rep PR is 350 pounds on the bench. I'm not just talking about the hijackers, I mean the staff and the people outside the plane. Oh, this was once again, they went to North Africa, remember? They took the flight to North Africa. This is before a lot of the shit going on. But yeah, no, that's a 2-plate bench. My PR is 350 for a 1 rep. I just had to flex on you boys. Oh yeah, I just had to flex. I'm sorry, little man. You just had to hear my 158 kilogram bench press PR. Don't you feel small?
Completely leveling the entire building and killing 61 people.
Why?
And ever since that fateful day, suicide bombings have been Islamic terrorists' bread and butter.
Yeah.
Because if they martyr themselves in the name of Allah, they get 72 virgins in heaven.
I still love the idea that the 72 virgins in heaven are just a bunch of like Nick Fuentes cat boys. It's 158 pound plastic explosive. No, 100 kilogram. I was 100 kilogram. That's 100 kilograms. So 100 kilograms is about 350 pounds. 100 kilograms is 200 pounds. Is 220 pounds. 221 pounds if you want to round up. That's what they were carrying.
And why go out and do it on the battlefield where you're taking a little bit of a gamble where, yeah, you might die quickly or you might have a very long and very slow, horrific death from gruesome and painful injuries. So why not just be a suicide bomber instead where you die in about 0.02 seconds? Also, just
Is 100 kilograms of plastic lighter? 100 kilograms is 221 pounds, H250.
Just to make everyone very, very aware of this, getting 72 virgins in martyrdom is not mentioned anywhere at all in the Quran.
Yeah. Pretty much. That's actually one of the things I did know for a while. In fact, there was some weird mistranslation where people actually thought for a while through the original translation of the Quran that it was in reference to grapes. And then there was just some mistranslation throughout the years from the ancient text, from the original text.
That whole fucking 72 virgins thing actually comes from a hadith which was written somewhere around the year 884 AD.
Yeah.
A hadith is basically something that gets added to Muslim belief by Muslim scholars who claim that this hadith was something that God totally told the Prophet Muhammad, pinky promise, we swear, and Muhammad just totally forgot to write it down in the Quran.
Kind of like how people who claim to be scholars, or realistically, they're not even actual Christian scholars, but they're ones that work behind the scenes, that will totally claim that, yes, in fact, you must serve your greatest allies constantly. You must always turn the other cheek, Christians, don't you know? Jesus Christ never ever said pick up the sword and trade in the cloak. You know, you must always be a pacifist little pushover bitch. And it says right here that you have to just give up your nation, push over for the rest of us. It's kind of like that type of shit show where it's all basically fan fiction writing for the self-servants of individuals. Except it's from its own in-party rather than a party of outside of the actual religious order.
Oh, the word of God, God spoke to you and you just forgot to write that down.
Yeah.
Forgot to write down the word of God. I mean, I don't know, man. I think if God spoke to me, I would kind of remember that shit.
Yeah.
Also, for those curious, the
messenger of Allah said, "Sir, 6 things Allah for the martyr. 6 things with Allah for the martyr. He's forgiven of the first flow of blood he suffers. He is shown in his place in paradise. He's protected from punishment in his grave. Secure from the greatest terror, the crown of his dignity is placed upon his head. And his game and its gems are better in the world than what is in it. He is married to 72 wives along Al-Huri of paradise, and he may intercede for 70 of his close relatives." The hadith is Hassan Sahih.
hadith is called the Jami'at Tirmidhi, and it reads as follows. There are 6 things with Allah for the martyr. He is forgiven with the first flow of blood
Joseph Smith.
he suffers. He is shown his place in paradise. He is protected from punishment in the grave, secured from the greatest terror. The crown of dignity is placed upon his head, and its gems are better than the world and what is in it. He is married to 72 wives from among the wide-eyed houris of paradise. I'm not calling them whores, that's just how it's pronounced. And he may intercede for 70 of his close relatives. Intercede just means that they get to be a sort of guardian angel for their relatives in the afterlife, not that they also get to bang their relatives in the afterlife.
Which would be very on par for the religion of peace, considering you look at the incest rates across the, the replacers of England, but...
As we all know, those fuckers don't wait for the afterlife to do that.
I'm sorry, but fuck me. That's what I was talking about.
That shit. Tangent over. My point is that for exactly 100 years from the very first suicide bombing in 1881 all the way up to 1981, there was not one single suicide bombing carried out by Muslims, even though that hadith has been around since 884 AD.
It sounds like the hadith was made specifically in recruitment of young men. Because just hear me out. We know that the Quran is nowhere near as old as the original biblical text of the Bible, nor the original Torah. So what I'm trying to get at is that the hadith was written in post as a, for lack of better terms, a religious isekai harem story. You die a warrior, you get isekai to a paradise. What's better than having powers and dignity, crowned king of dignity for your own dominion to protect over close of your relatives? That's honor. You know, you live with honor, and of course, in reward of it all, you have 72 virgins or 72 to take with you. That gets any young men out in the middle of the village, any young sheep herder, buttfuck nowhere, to just join your cause to die, because because what's better than getting 72 bad biddies on your schlong in the afterlife? And let me tell you this much: I get once again, I've said before, yes, harem stories are a great fancy for a lot of men. I will say that. It's great if you got a story that's written by a man and the women are written by men, because more often than not, when men make waifus, we tend to impose a lot of personality that we have upon ourselves. And just said waifus are personalities we like to see. Typically, we write women as feminine, but they also have traits of men in their personality. Is Cosmo? Oh, is Chris God damn it! What I'm trying to get at, though, is that I think after a one-night stand with 72 of your new wives, I'm pretty sure you're gonna fucking want to be dead in the afterlife, because good lord, that's gonna be a hell of a time to deal with. Unless Allah recruited the best isekai writers known to man to fucking save your harem ass. My brother in Christ, I'd rather just have one wife. I'd rather be loyal and have one wife, man. And I'd rather she be loyal to me, too. You learn that you don't want to fucking have a harem. Especially if you're reading up history about royals as much as I have. Ooh, lord, the amount of cradle murders there are. Holy shit.
However, since 1981, several institutions have estimated that 85 to 95% of all suicide bombings that have taken place since 1981
I'm gonna take the liberal number on that one, and that being 95%.
have all been carried out by Muslim terrorists. So what changed during that time?
Yes. Here we go. Dune. There we go. Point of the video.
It was first released in 1965, mostly in the West, and it had some mixed success.
Okay.
But it very quickly became very popular among fans of sci-fi, and over the years it gained such a huge cult following that the book started spreading all over the world. And despite the very famously strict speech laws that most Middle Eastern countries have, Dune was never banned in any Middle Eastern countries, and it actually became rather popular over there, and that was due to the Fremen. For those who haven't read the books...
Okay, for as little as I do know about Dune, the Fremen I believe, are based off the Bedouin. So, in terms of cultural context, and it's not a complete, universal guarantee, but for the more scholared of the Arabic world, that were literate, this would ring home with them. You gotta remember, a lot of old sci-fi, if they wanted a foreign language, like an alien people, an alien race that was still close enough to humanity, they would often look towards either obscured or fringe societies known to the Western world at the time, because they were a bit more cultured, quote unquote, and just picked it up, and they would indoctrinate they would induce some of the language of said people as mumbo jumbo, as so-called like an alien language. I would not be surprised that in Arabic, a lot of the stuff that the war chants just translates to just gobbledygook, but more often than not, it's to the Western, like, cattle, just like your average Western like reader, or especially just trying to just read a chill book, it would suffice for the Fremen, yeah, basically the Fremen would, yeah, essentially.
Or watch the movies, in Dune, the Fremen are a native people of the desert planet Arrakis. And
I tell from 40k are inspired by the Chinese, or the Orc inspired by the British. Exactly. And we're talking about when the Orc are inspired by the British, I don't want people to, I mean, people of 40k, of people who have been long-standing fans of 40k would know this. The Orcs, and once again, I'm not even a 40k nerd. I'm not much of a fan of 40k either. Even though how popular it is, I just feel like it's too forced on. To me, that just kind of grown an aversion to it. And thank you, Shar. But I'm saying is that the Orcs are based off both between the Briton Saxons and the native Britons and Celtics of the islands. Arrakis, Iraq. Pretty much. That would also explain the spice. Because the oil and the black sand, you know what I'm saying. And the Cockneys. I mean, the Orcs use the Cockney accent, but their barbaricism and stupidity mainly comes from the stereotypes around both how the Romans wrote about the native Britons of the island and how the Saxons were, you know, I was making a British teeth joke. Well, there's that too, Shar. I mean, you're actually on the money with how the Orcs were written based off the British.
I'm doing this because they aren't actually natives, they've just been there for a very, very long time, but let's not have me going on a 3-hour-long rant about the lore.
Please.
Right, for the purpose of this video, let's just call them natives. And Frank...
Also scary enough, too, is I've known... The funny thing about Dune, and my father could attest to this, when Dune got more popular in the 80s, especially with the production of the first movie with Sting as, I'm going to use Sting because he was the most famous actor in that movie, i.e. Sting from the Police, Sting, Gordon B. Summers, with Dune in particular, and maybe it was because of Sting, but it could also be prior to that, a lot of women in particular got into Dune. It was one of the few sci-fi series of the 80s and earlier sci-fi that had a predominant amount of female audience in general, which is a bit of a shock to most people, but I guess Dune really played into both the super native, like, people who like the women that will worship and whimper and cry over natives, like, you know, the Dances with Wolves type of ladies. Apparently they fucking love Dune, and that's what started Dune to get more popular as more of like a unisex type of series that the Land was promised to us 3,000 light years ago. But that's just, even my father tests that. He's like, I liked the movies, but it particularly got popular with women. And the books too. Like, you think, oh, okay, the movie because of Gordon B. Summers, so because of Sting, but it's like, no, it was the books especially got popular.
Albert drew a lot of real-world themes into his books. So, when he created the Fremen, who are desert-dwelling nomadic warriors with fanatical religious beliefs,
yep,
he based them on the Bedouin.
I called it! Fucking called it! The Bedouin! I called it!
Real-life desert-dwelling nomadic warriors with fanatical religious beliefs, that being Islam.
Yep.
And, just like in Islam, the Fremen religion promises rewards in the afterlife for martyrdom. Frank Herbert also very often uses the term jihad all throughout his books to describe any kind of holy war that the Fremen engage in.
Yep.
And there is one very, very important part of the books that I want to focus on. That being a suicide bombing that was performed by a Fremen warrior. Here is that part of the book in full. The troop carrier settled towards the patch of blue-clad bodies.
What is greater than spice, jihad? Inshallah, brother. Inshallah.
Its wings crept out to full reach, began the cupping action of a quick stop. Hawat's attention was caught by a flash of sun on metal to the south. A Thopter plummeting there in a power dive, wings folded flat against its sides. Its jets a golden flare against the dark silvered grey of the sky. It plunged like an arrow towards the troop carrier, which was unshielded because of the lasgun activity around it. Straight into the carrier, the diving Thopter plunged. A flaming roar shook the basin. Rocks tumbled from the cliff walls all around. A geyser of red-orange shot skyward from the sand where the carrier and its companion Thopters had been. Everything there.
Fuck, Halo, I'm sorry, but like, nostalgia for me reading old, like, the Halo comics and the, like, Halo up to about 4, and playing the games up to 4. Man, Halo really took a downfall, but god damn was it good.
Caught in the flame. It was the Fremen who took off in that captured Thopter, Hawat thought. He deliberately sacrificed himself to get that carrier. Great Mother, what are these Fremen? A reasonable exchange, said the Fremen beside Hawat. There must have been 300 men in that carrier. Now we must see to their water and make plans to get another aircraft. Now, Frank Herbert and the Dune series have inspired a lot of things.
So Halo's about Islam. I didn't say that. Halo's about Christianity.
Mostly in sci-fi. For example, the Jedi from Star Wars are based on the Bene Gesserit from Dune. And the planet Tatooine is also based on Arrakis.
Yeah. No shit. I'm sorry. But, like, no shit.
That great big fucking arsehole Hayao Miyazaki
Thank you. We also know one too.
Drew huge inspiration from Dune when he made Nausicaa Valley of the Winds. Lots of things in sci-fi were inspired by Dune. The Wheel of Time, Stargate, Tremors, even The Matrix with its anti-AI and Coming of the Chosen One narrative.
Yep.
But the biggest one ever is Warhammer.
Fucking hell. Warhammer. The reason why you're a broke ass building plastic model kits. They said Gundam would do that. No. Fucking Warhammer's probably crippled more bank accounts than Gunpla ever could.
Warhammer draws extremely heavily from Dune. The God Emperor and his hyper-religious fanatic.
Is Nuasia a female arch ready? H250. My brother in Christ. You're talking references that I only have a slight glimmer on. You're asking questions I don't know. Gundam is cheap compared to Warhammer. Thank you, Shar. No wonder you work for Lockheed Martin. Your broke ass can't afford it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't get addicted to plastic crack, okay? It just doesn't interest me. Gundam doesn't interest me. Neither does Warhammer. You know, my brother in Christ, if fucking Battle Ferry Yukikaze got bigger than Macross, I would be building fucking Battle Ferry Yukikaze kits. I don't like Mecha. I like Battle Ferry Yukikaze, right? But there's hardly any fucking model kits for Battle Ferry Yukikaze. I just want Zaku, so yeah, you got a point there.
Legions, the Age of Strife, where man rose up against artificial intelligence that resulted in a complete ban on all thinking machines, exactly like the Butlerian Jihad in Dune that also banned all thinking machines. Shit, even just the term lasguns. When they copied that homework, they didn't even change it around a little bit. Warhammer just...
Why would you? It just... What do you want to say, laser guns, or do you want to have a shorthand slang that sounds cooler? Lasguns, fuck. I mean, that... What would you want to have? Your blasters? I'm sorry, even as a Star Wars nerd, blasters? Fuck that. I want lasguns. Because the blaster implies that it both has stun mode. Like, it has multiple modes for stun, for kill, for, like, all sorts of different modes. This shit's just like, it will vaporize a part of your body. It will puncture through with pure heat and energy. This is fucking metal. I like blasters. And you know what sucks, too? I'm just going to go on a little tangent here, too. I had Lego Star Wars as a kid. I was pissed. And I'm glad I got off Star Wars when I did. Because those motherfuckers, when they took away my plastic guns, my plastic blasters, they gave with the fucking minifigs and gave them the little cute little ray guns with the little pew-pew and the little coin fucking slot bullets. Fuck that noise. I wanted my customizable clone trooper with a fucking long rifle to open up on some bitch-ass rebels, okay? Right? I'm putting those rebels' skulls and blowing the fucking brains out with my cool clone troopers, okay? I get it. Different timelines, different eras, but my brother in Christ, I think we don't need any more of this little very gun control bullshit. I want to have my rifled up militia of clone troopers that I customize and molded shit onto to make them look cool. Or slug throwers, yeah. Blasters on pleasure mode. Blasters on pleasure mode! You know, I can think of a few VTubers I know who would fucking love to have an electrostatic eroticism blaster. I'm gonna tell you that much.
Directly took that term and just rammed it right fucking in there. Not that I'm complaining though, I fucking love
I'm putting my blaster in Kurt Cobain mode.
Warhammer. And so far, I've read about 20 books from
Blaster
the
in
Heresy
break mode.
series, and as of recording this, I am on the Siege of Terra, and I'm currently about halfway through.
Why not Magna Guard stuff? I don't know. I like Clone. To be honest with you, I loved the Clone Wars. Clone Wars is my favorite era of Star Wars to this day. Clone Wars is my favorite era of Star Wars, right? I get it. There was, you know, most people got in. I was a kid. I got into it through the series. The expanded Clone Wars is just great. Blaster on Gyaro mode. Charlemagne, you didn't generate a Gyaro on Friday. Why didn't you generate my Gyaro on Friday? You said you would do that Friday. Why didn't you generate my Gyaro? I want my Gyaro right now. Those things are long electric and rods.
Warhawk. I really, really, really love that Sanguinius guy. He's like my favorite character. I love him. I love him.
Okay, I'll admit this is there's parts of Warhammer that I get forced into viewing through you fucking nerds. I think they make a Gyaro getting banged. He didn't. I made Casca Gyaro. Oh yeah, that one was a shit show. But I will admit some of the art in Warhammer goes fucking hard.
I love him so fucking much. I sure hope nothing bad happens to him. Point being that if Dune inspired so much stuff, it's not too much of a stretch to think that since 1965, when Dune spread out into the Middle East, that some Muslims read it, saw the Fremen as some heckin-based representation of their ancestors who stole aircraft to suicide.
Wow, he's just like me, wallahi.
Bomb their enemies, and they thought to themselves, Alhamdulillah, Stilgar
Lisan al-Gaib, as it was written. Paul does something mildly Stilgar. Lisan al-Gaib, as it was written. Either he is aware or he... No. Dank fucking read the full... what's the book's called again? Oh, shit, I can't remember. The story... Astaris. He read the full Astaris. He owns copies of the Astaris. But... I don't know if you're aware with you. When Dune started to get popular, and this was when I was just starting up as an apprentice in the automotive trade, if we were about to do something really stupid, I remember some of the guys screaming before we go and do something really stupid on test drives. We go, Lisa Nagaib! Because like, if you had to break in brakes and we had to like, okay, go floor it to like 120 kilometers an hour or something like that, like we had to do a complete relearn on the system of the car. It's like, okay, best of luck trying to die. Lisa Nagaib! Just fucking screaming shit like that sometimes.
Literally me. And then
you gotta remember, a lot of automotive techs are either like white trash or like, you know, kind of like meatheads, or you get a lot of fucking nerds who get into automotive nowadays. And I was happening to be on the nerd side. We fucking loved screaming weird references.
Bada bang, bada literally fucking boom. You now need to forever get your balls felted by rages on a power trip. It's just very, very, very strange that for the first 100 fucking years of suicide bombings, there was not one single suicide bombing done by a Muslim. Then Dune comes out in 1965, and it's got 16 years to spread throughout the Middle East. And then the people who the Fremen were literally modelled after start doing Fremen suicide bombing so much that in the modern day, 95% of all suicide bombings are done by them. The most famous one of which involves stealing the enemy's aircraft and crashing it into them exactly like...
Listen, Nagaib, the 9/11 Raider? Oh, fuck! Imagine! Fucking imagine hearing that shit over the black box. Over the fucking air traffic control. I'm sorry, it's a tragedy. Granted, national tragedy, national horrible tragedy. But fuck me, that notion is too good to pass up.
Like it's described in the book. So how do you go from literally fucking zero for 100 fucking years and then suddenly 95 fucking %? Also, 9/11 actually went on to inspire a lot of other things by itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, a quick little note. I'm not sure why, but the Freedom Tower, as they call it, the current World Trade Center, which is the one right here, the Freedom Tower, is actually like between 10 to 15 stories shorter than the original World WTC 1 and WTC 2. Part of me, considering American exceptionalism, does feel insulted that while in a bit more grandiose in architecture, that the new WTC is shorter than 1 or 2. That just doesn't sit right with me.
You've all probably heard of this pipeline. A man called Gerard Way.
Frank, where are the towers? Shadow the Hedgehog. Oh fuck. You know, that does make sense considering the fact that he was in cryo sleep for how long? Oh god.
Actually witnessed the 9/11 attacks, and it made him question his own mortality.
What was this?
Actually, you've all probably heard of this pipeline. A
Yeah.
man called Gerard Way actually
Oh fuck.
witnessed the 9/11 attacks, and it made him question his own mortality and purpose. So he started a band called My Chemical Romance, which went on to create the emo subculture,
Yeah.
which also created the offshoot subculture of scene kids.
Yeah.
And I just had a lot of fucking Nam flashbacks about all of my exes.
I get that a venomous snake or frog will display colorful patterns to ward enemies off as a preemptive warning to their capabilities, but you know, I just gotta try that leopard neon print puss once in my life, brothers. When I was a young boy, my father saw 9/11 Jared Way. Thank you, Jared. Very cool.
Then, My Chemical Romance's music inspired a woman called Stephanie Meyer to write a book called Twilight.
So, going back to serious Kovac lore, I mentioned before my favorite car and my metaphorical girlfriend is my Volvo C30 that I take good care of, and I guess somehow 9/11 and Dune connects to me in some way because my car was used as a sponsored promotion in Twilight because the Volvo C30 was a product placement by Ford ownership of Volvo to promote the company, because in the original Twilight novels, Edward drives a Volvo S60R sedan, which is one of the fastest mid-size saloons ever built, but they decided to trade it up for a more fashionable hot hatchback. No, it was not the car that Edward crushes. It was the car that Edward drove in the first movie. I believe the car that he crushes with another Volvo, but it was an XC60 or it wasn't the 90. He didn't drive the SUV. His father drove the SUV. I believe it was the XC60 in the later movies. That was the one he crushed. They made drivable saloon. That's what they call mid-size sedans over in England. H250. That's just terminology. But Edward drove a Volvo C30, and I guess some way or the other, 9/11 and Dune led to me driving a Volvo in my current life. Isn't this wonderful, gentlemen? 9/11 will create the waifus that I'm going to have for the channel. Isn't this a wonderful revelation that we're going to have? My merchandise was because of 9/11. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Which took things as cool as vampires and werewolves and made them gay as fuck. Then Twilight
It will get worse. Okay, also, Twilight, I think we all know this too, the guys in my chat, but for those who don't know, Twilight had an offshoot by Stephanie Meyer called, what was it? Was it something Blood or something? But it was basically Stephanie Meyer decided to do a practice with because she was laying on a pile of money, now kind of like a J.K. Rowling situation where she had so much money to spend. She decided to have some fun and would do some writing exercises, and she made a Twilight because she was probably getting she probably read all the reviews and saw a bunch of guys making fun of Twilight because, you know, their girlfriends want to see this lame-ass movie that was basically just a bunch of schlock. And she thought to herself, why not just make the movie, why not write the book for men? So she wrote Twilight, but Rule 63, and it was only for one book. Basically, it was an abridged version of the first complete novel down to like 100. No, it was something else. I forget what it was called. It was not The Host, but it was basically just Rule, gender bent, Twilight. So you had a pale, it was basically a nerdy, reclusive young man in high school, or boy, essentially, who gets doted and crushed on by a yandere vampire woman that has a crush on her and debating between eating her or, like, you know, to feed the vampire lust. And then is in a love triangle with a tomboy Native American werewolf girl, an athletic werewolf girl. Yeah, it's one of those things, and once again, there's a famous green text around it. And basically, once you read the synopsis, you're kind of like, you know, I kind of get it. It's basically just like it's like a weird in one way or the other. It's kind of like some sort of like it's basically like a slice of life romance novel in some way. Brother, where do I sign? Unfortunately, she discontinued it, but the Twilight fangirls got a hold of it and they started doing continuations of their own. So go on AO3 and try finding it yourself. I care not to read it. I don't know how good it is. Just the synopsis sounds good, but considering it's a woman writing, I'm not gonna put the pen on paper saying it's being good work. Truth be told. I want to roll on the mid with my tomboy werewolf while sharing romantic dinner with my yandere vampire babe. Same, bro. Same.
Another woman called E.L. James to write a degenerotic fanfiction about Twilight that really should have never left her fucking hard drive, and then she just changed all of the names and removed the vampire stuff, and that book became 50 Shades of
9/11 created 50 Shades of Grey?
Grey. A book that has went on to cause women to confuse the utter fuck out of men everywhere because they're always harping on about #MeToo and women's safety, and then in the bedroom they're suddenly asking you to choke them.
Rape on the first fucking date? Okay. As a viewer of Ember Paradox, because when she started rating my streams, I made it apparent to subscribe to her as a thank you. Ember Paradox is also a writer, too. And Ember spoke on 50 Shades of Grey and said she has no fucking... E.L. James has no fucking idea anything about BDSM, apparently. Because it's Ember's stories to tell, but she's mentioned of how, like, fucking she was in the BDSM scene. I don't... It's her stories, not mine, so what she shared on stream. Basically, she's like, as a woman who's actually part of the BDSM scene, E.L. James has no fucking idea what she's writing about. So you get a bunch of normcore basic bitch women who think they're quirked up kinky leather bitches because they read 50 Shades of Grey, and then you got actual leather bitches that are like, oh, you have no fucking idea how this works, so you're gonna end up hurting yourself, or you're gonna end up being a bore. Shit. And to me, it's just the guy in the corner. I'm like, you know what? It's just like the white boy, and it's just the white boy in his own little lane here, trying to keep himself sane in the world. I'm just kind of like, you know what? I think I'm good. I think I'm good from the dating pool. In honesty, I think I'm good from going to the dating pool. My understanding, a lot of BDSM involves asking for consent before going out. Yeah, exactly. It's also apparently that if you get into more intense sessions, especially when you start the role play of more masochistic or sadistic play, depending on the partners of depending which partner is in the receiving end of which. A lot of that, if you do truly care and love for your partner, is the aftercare part, which often lasts longer than the actual session itself because you do have to get them out of the mindset of where they were beforehand. If you don't do that, you could end up fucking with someone's head to a degree that is pretty unhealthy. Once again, Ember has a lot more experience with that stuff. She'll talk about it. She's not really a LootTuber, but she has mentioned about her, like, what she's done in her life. So she's got stories to tell. I've unfortunately had to sit through them because I'm a bit more prudish, but I'm prudish not with my jokes, but in terms of experience, I'm very prudish in that end. So she's got things to say. I don't. That's her stories, not really mine. Just using it as an example, but yeah, EL James has no fucking idea how BDSM actually operates. I am legit curious about this aftercare. Aftercare is literally just it's exactly as it sounds. It's just soft talking, caressing. It's basically like pillow talk, essentially, from what I'm aware of. It's bringing them out of the state of being a pleasure tool or pleasure, or a toy, and bring them down into reality of, hey, let's bring you back to the ground that you are loved and you're a caring human being. I am your partner. I must take care of you. It's that type of mentality too. If you go to like a BDSM club, like for hookups and shit, you're gonna end up a whole different wrong way of things, because you could fuck with someone's head, or you yourself could be fucked up because of the intensity and state of it. Ah, so sweet. Yeah, exactly. It's basically just pillow talk.
So basically, while the Dune series is absolutely phenomenal, I mean, I've read the first 3 books, Frank Herbert owes every single one of us an apology.
Yeah, go apologize to me, motherfucker.
For 10 whole fucking years of a genre of music that was essentially my girlfriend of 3 weeks broke up with me. Here's a whole fucking album about it.
Thank you. I will say, though, is that aesthetics of the scene, and I guess not really, because goth was long before My Chemical Romance, because, I mean, for fuck's sake. Emo scene in itself is oh dang, Frank is dead. Well, fuck you. He's got to apologize to me from the afterlife, right? Wasn't this whole thing about fucking wars and afterlife? Apologize to me, you fucking asshole. But no, like, listen, there's parts of goth and emo I find is cool, but like the mainstream, like, oh, so sad, fuck up that nihilistic bullcrap. I like the fashion though. I was an emo kid growing up, like emo-ish. The problem is I often get mistaken for wearing eyeliner in my older years now. I don't have eyeliner. I have either tired eyes, the senpaku eyes, just from staying up late and working late into the night, but also my natural eyelashes. My natural eyelashes and like color is very dark and I have long eyelashes for a man, so it does look like I'm wearing eyeliner. Yeah, you have that as well. But like, also my skin's very pale. My skin is very pale too, so it especially looks like I'm wearing eyeliner even though I'm not. So I do get mistaken as being like a LARPing or like a very light version of a goth or an emo, but I'm like, no, this is just my natural facade. I don't wear any shit on my face.
An event that gave governments an excuse to somehow suck even fucking harder, and for some fucking how, making women even more retarded.
You could be a Puff Jared way. You know what? That's part of the shtick I'm going for when I get the 2D model. There's gonna be some change up on the structure. There's gonna be a lot more musculature to fit my actual frame.
Now, I completely understand that when it comes to 9/11, there were definitely other factors at play, but
yeah, a lot of factors.
I feel that my theory still holds strong. Also, this is not up for debate. This is not a conversation. You're fucking gay, and I'm fucking right.
You're coming at me sideways.
My Turkish barbers. My phone repair shop. My groom in gang.
What the fuck? What the fuck, man? Thank you, Dankula. Very cool. Good Lord Almighty. What should we do now? Some more Dankula or something else? Because that took me for a fucking ride. Jesus Christ. What do we do? Where do we go from here? The Emperor of Arrakis, yeah. Can't do the Chris Benoit video yet. I have not signed up with YouTube with my ID because I didn't give them my fucking ID. 'cause I'm not going to. Oh, what should we do? I was rewatching the stuff I missed, so not sure. Okay. I gotta think here. Doop-a-doo, doop-doop-a-doo. Doop-a-doo. Doo-doo-doo. What does Alex... What does Sirius Kovac want to do? Oopsie, whoopsie, poopsie. I'll ping you with a Gyaru and Tal. Okay. Let's see. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? I almost said Arrakis there. Fuck. My name's not fucking Arrakis. Oh. Let's see what you did, Charlemagne. Oh, goddamn. Oh. Oh, Char, how could you do this? You're making me hard on stream. Oh my god, Char. I'm serious Arrakis of the Fremen. Oh, fucking hell. My brother in Christ, if I was in like my own version of Dune, we'd be worshiping the Volvo white block as our new god. That's my religion. It's in a Toonie style, but it's a busty Gyar with thick thighs and caramel. I'm gonna DSP and I just have to pull a DSP here. Come on, okay. Oh, the stream's on, huh? The stream's on, been on the whole time. Hello. But no, what do we do now? We've done this. Do we do anything about cars or just going to Yarn Hub or see what's up? See what's up with Yarn Hub? We can watch a video from Yarn Hub, which is about historical reenactments of stories, and we can probably watch something cool. Char was here when we watched the battle about the ME-163s, but we can go watch something else cool. You guys want to see the time when America fought the Soviets in World War II?
It's the
Also,
it's the more
I'm gonna okay. So I'm gonna go on a quick like little tangent before we start the video. We know much about. We know much. Okay. So we. Or an audit. Nah, we're not doing financial audit tonight. I want to be in a rage mode. I don't want to spend 4 hours watching myself, getting ready to kill myself. What about the human experience the Japanese did? Oh, the human experiments? Oh, we can have some fun with that afterwards. But, let's be real here. I'm noticing a noticeable trend of a lot of, VTubers in the West trying to capture the Gyaru, genre as their model's basis. And the unfortunate thing is, as many men have spoken before, is that Gyarus don't actually really exist in real life. Kind of like actual goths, they've kind of gone the way of the dinosaur, and we only really have like flanderized versions nowadays in their steed. Basically, the most marketable, most palatable, most, I guess, titillating version of the Gyaru is what we have nowadays, as opposed to the original Gyaru. And of course, actual Gyarus, for the most part, I saw a cowgirl Gyaru. Yeah, Lulu Lasso, I like her. I'm just saying is that I'm also noticing, besides Lulu, there's a lot of, I'm starting to see like a lot of pop-ups, whether it be V-tweeters or whore-tubers, using the Gyaru as their, personification to start off with. And as a wise Japanese man on a Mongolian basket weaving forum once spoke, he questioned why so many Westerners were talking about Gyarus, considering they don't really exist anymore, and that they don't really stick around. And as a great philosopher responded to him in retort said, if Gyarus have gone the way of the dinosaur, point to me a man who doesn't like dinosaurs, because that's why we love Gyarus. We have a weird fetishization of the past, of a time in the 2000s we partially remember, or only saw through media, of the Valley Girl, but the Valley Girl with a heart of gold. Basically, Gyarus are of that mentality, but of the East and brought over to the West, and to us it's a bit more exotic, but unfortunately we know that it's kind of gone the way of the dinosaur too. The actual Gyarus don't exist anymore. I mean, how many whores, put on bronze tan and fucking fake tan themselves up and put on, they don't do the pink hair dye, but like the bleach platinum blonde, and then go on and just be more delinquent and loose around the goose. Speaking of, I recall one manga that made a female dinosaur babes. T-Rex no Kanojo. Oh, Oh, what you doing there, boy? Don't make me read another fucking Monster Musume series. My dick can't handle it. Oh, boy. Non-Summerjack. Why you gotta do me like this, man? I can't take it. I can't get into another series. Also, another thing I want to say is that, you may have also, and Chaz might have noticed this too, but when I'm talking about, like, manga that I read, which, because I used to gobble up romantic slice of life manga when I was in high school and as my early college years. I guess the more black pill I've gone with life, or like just the dating scene in general, you'll notice I'll speak ill of series with really pure characters like Marin Kitagawa, where I'll get really depressed and doom pill about her, like, you know, in the chat, like say, hey, you know, she would fucking just run around Gojo and just dump him immediately. It's because the moment you start dealing with real life, I just stopped really caring about like rom-com series, right? It's for Coma as well. They do shoot different types of down girls. I don't really want to see that, man. Okay, that's a little too erotic. Yeah, that's a little too horny for me. But what I'm trying to say is, like, I just kind of got to the point now where you try gamey. Do not say that. No, just kind of like, you know. I see these series and I'm like, okay, my pessimism comes into play and it's like, okay, do not say Marin will abandon Go. Dude, the series is over. Marin and him are married. They have kids. They have a kid. The series is over. There's nothing like the people that make that shit happen are the NTR artists and Western artists who buy into the psyop and they do blacked shit with, you know, fucking Marin because we for some reason have a fucking worship of that crap over here. Especially in the artist scene. It's pretty disgusting, to be honest with you. And it's basically, if you actually like the series and rate it, you don't understand how pure it is, but equally too, my pessimism comes into play with the fact that I just, myself personally, the reason why I just don't really like those series as much as often is I can basically read between the lines of like, okay, the artist is just trying to make a quick buck here and get their name out there. This is their sophomore series. They had a couple failures underneath their belt. And the moment I start, I'm like, oh, it's going to be a series about girl with X personality with Y interest, likes loser guy. And then, like, I hate, you know, like, and then I start getting very nepotistic about things. Then I also think to myself, too, then, you know, okay, it's meant to market to lonely men and then how to sell it. And then I also kick myself in the teeth sometimes. I'm like, well, fucking, My Dress Up Darling, for God's sake, which I'm talking about here, was written by a woman. In fact, Marin was technically the artist's, not self-insert, but her ideal version of what the artist wanted to be, but never had the skill or drive to do. But Gojo is her ideal man, which a lot of people who make fun of Gojo, and especially in the West, would call him a fucking loser and like a self-insert for the mangaka and the reader. Gojo is literally the mangaka's ideal man. Funny enough. So I get really depressed and downtrodden about things, but truth be told, the more I begin to understand or like look into series, sometimes there's always cash grabs I do come across. And it's like, you know, Monster Girl with, you know, XYZ and this love, and it's just full of just non-story, but she's such a perfect girl for the guy that does nothing. Yeah, but Gojo, on the other hand, is the dude's a master of his craft. He's disciplined. People just only call him bland and lame because while he's introverted, he is skilled in what he does, but he's very quiet about it. He doesn't make it apparent. He would be a handsome guy who would blend in with you and me, but he's not like a star-studded. He's not a stud. He's just a dude. And I don't know. IRL me, just like especially with art, you know, just how life is, and if you live through the internet vicariously, which I try not to, I've been spending less and less time. Like I've deleted my Twitter because I got more depressed dealing with just, you know, you go on Twitter to log in, you're like, okay, I gotta spread my brand out there, and I gotta use Twitter to do that. And the more I started to do that, the more I started to hate myself, because then you feed your timeline, you get your comments in your timeline, you get a bunch of spam in your timeline, a bunch of cold posting in your timeline. You're like, man, I fucking hate this. I still want my Marin or Galco. Yeah, well, Galco less, especially afterwards. I was always in one for the Hokkaido Gals. Hokkaido Gals is actually the series I read as it started to come out. That's the one I hopped on the train before it even got popular enough, before the anime was announced. I was on it the moment it was on like chapter 1 or 2. I was on Hokkaido Gals back when. But you know, when you see, when you deal with social media posts, or you live it through third hand through sharing of it, it's like, oh, this guy that cared for this girl got dumped by him. You know, this esports gamer who cared for this girl for about 7 years fucking got dumped by her and used by her. Like a bunch of other shit that happens like this. It's kind of like, man, I just don't know. And then that makes me get even so bitter that I don't even want to pick up fantasy series. When I say fantasy, like the fantasy of dealing with like romance series, because I get so down to it. I'm like, this is just too, this feels more fantasy than literal fantasy. Like Berserk or Rose of Versailles feels a lot more grounded than this. Like fucking Claymore feels more grounded than My Dress Up Darling when I'm in my deepest pits of despair, right? I believe Galco was still a pure when I fell in love with. Yeah, I mean, it's just because of how the author went down. It's kind of like, that's, I mean, yeah, that's why I didn't really have an interest in Galco. But I guess maybe that's why I don't know. Like I want to like a series. I want to feel hope again, but equally too, I'm very analytical about everything and around me, and it just made me too afraid to take that risk to say hi to someone because I'm scared. So I pick up Nana. I'd still need to read a bit more, but the first Nana that they show you reminds me a bit of me so far. Yeah. I don't know. Like, if I had to relate to an MC, and I don't think I've ever read a protagonist in any of these love series that is like me, because, I mean, for fuck's sake, I don't want to have myself represented in a series. I don't try to find someone who's representative of me in a series. You'd have to make him a physicality of a Chad in terms of height and strength and everything, but have him basically be a loser in personality, because he's self-doubting, self-hating. Like, that's basically the MC that would represent me, right? Which just wouldn't work, because like you have the genetics and the physicality and strength of, you know, what most men would use to slay poon left and right, and then I just don't have yeah. Worst case, pick up a smut manga and just enjoy the ride. Volleyball girls at least keep me satisfied at times. Yeah, if you're into that. I don't know. I even stopped like caring too much about ecchi series, because it just like, I want something a bit more genuine, right? I do want to feel something a bit more genuine. But like, once again, I'm just saying, like, it's just, I don't know. Anyway, well, I want to watch more history videos. Let me get rid of subtitles before the video starts, because it's gonna want to give me subtitles. You know, I don't want subtitles. I can hear perfectly. I'm not deaf. Did I get into Ray Earth? I don't know. I ping you with a Gyaru. Thank you. Thanks, Charles. Now I'm talking about how black-pilled I am, and Gyaru's only bring me with happiness and despair. We're gonna watch a video how the Americans fought the Soviets in World War II.
Morning of the 7th of November 1944, and 12 P-38 Lightnings soar high over Yugoslavia.
I'm also going to say this too about Yarnhub, is that if you've seen Yarnhub's earlier videos, 8 years ago, give or take, like, it had very, like, rough animation from a much smaller team, of course. Yarnhub nowadays is pretty on par with most modern game cutscenes, or, like, AA developer game cutscenes. They're solid animation nowadays. And I'm just loving the effects of the models, especially for the aircraft now.
Leading the flight
and the physics around the animation of the flight
is Colonel Clarence Theodore Edwinson. He spots a cloud of steam rising below. It's a German steam train, not the main target, but it's too juicy to pass up.
Let's go get it, boys.
Edwinson turns over and dives to the attack, his men following close behind. They pick up speed and lock the locomotive square in their sight.
I'm gonna be real too, a lot of the heavier fighters of World War II also, just generally, I feel are some of the coolest aircraft of the war. We know about the Mosquito, we know about the P-38 Lightning. The Japanese and Germans had some pretty interesting heavy fighter, twin-engine heavy fighters as well. The Bf-1110s that are also there, and my personal favorite is the Heinkel 219 Uhu, or the Eagle Owl, as it's better known as, then the German steam train transforms to the mega particle cannon. No, we're not doing Fuga. We're not doing more Fuga streams now. No, don't turn it to a soul cannon. But like that's just the German end. Like we're not about the Kiryu, or like, you know, the Kiryu fighter of the Japanese, which was just a fucking monster of a. Unfortunately, too little, too late, because it couldn't reach the height of the B-29 bombers in time. But like a lot of the Japanese interceptors, twin engine interceptors, are pretty interesting in their own right. But a lot of the heavy fighters that we saw of the war, especially with the Americans too, funnily enough, the concept and development came from the Dutch, of all people. If you look at I gotta look at the actual number of it. I believe it's the Fokker 13 was the Dutch heavy fighter designed by Anthony Fokker. Fokker heavy fighter plane, I believe was the. Let me look at my phone quickly, and I believe it is the Fokker G1. I believe. No, not that one. The Fokker G1, which was made for the Dutch Air Force, in the interstices of the wars, was a heavy twin-engine fighter, which was revolutionary for the time, but it basically led further development for both, pretty much any major aerial nation of that time. I mean, particularly the U.S. and Germany, to develop their heavy fighters around this aircraft, because it basically led the stage for what a heavy fighter could be. Mainly because with centralized guns, it could pack more armament for the bite of it. Here we are. It could pack more armament for the purpose it needed to do, but it could also have a stabilized gun platform that didn't need to be calibrated per an arcing range of fire. So these aircraft were absolutely, these 8 black dots across it, or these 8 black dots, they're all machine guns. This thing's a fucking monster, but they only made like a couple, basically barely 100 of these things before the Dutch got folded by the Germans during the invasion of, well, we threw geese at it. I don't know. Maybe, but like my point is that a lot of the heavy fighters of the war basically give their templates off to the Fokker G1, as it's the origin point for a lot of them.
Sights and pull the trigger. The locomotive is riddled with American fire, and steam pours out of holes all over the boiler as lightnings rise back up into the sky. But the Germans are quick to the defense. Black puffs of German flak burst around the formation, with shrapnel piercing the aircraft's thin metal.
Sorry, it's dark. My mistake.
Steam pours out of holes all over the boiler as
there we
lightnings rise back up into the sky.
There we go.
The Germans are quick to the defense. Black puffs of German flak burst around the formation, with shrapnel piercing the aircraft's thin metal skins.
Yeah.
Edmondson shouts on the radio.
Everyone, get low.
Yeah, that's you're a juicy target for flak. And the thing with flak, people remember too, is that flak is basically a shrapnel shot. So it explodes in a certain height or range, basically not with a proximity fuse, but like a time fuse, and it will go up and shoot a shrapnel at you if it, So basically, they're being shredded by rounds of shrapnel from the flak rounds. Basically, that's the point of flak. It's pretty destructive and pretty nasty when you think about it. What we kind of messed up if the train was hauling the 3 million. Ooh, that's a little spicy for the streams. I also wondered too, I'm not sure if you've heard about this H250 H250 as well, but have you heard about the it's basically an old myth that was made for treasure hunting, but it was I forgot what the train was actually called, but it was basically the Nazi gold train that people believe is still somewhere out there that is loaded up with Hermann Goering's like stash of stolen artifacts and gold, and it's somewhere buried in some offshot train tunnel somewhere in the Swiss Alps, and people are still hunting to this day for it, believing it's around there somewhere.
They turn to dive back to the ground to escape the German guns, but it's too late. One P-38 is struck directly and bursts into flames as the entire squadron dives for safety.
God damn.
The pilot's desperate voice is heard over the radio.
I'm hit! I'm going down!
Edwinson levels out low over the trees and whips
Goering's One Piece. Oh god, don't make me think of Goering butt ass naked and nothing but an open fur coat robe going, "The One Piece! The One Piece is real!"
his head back looking for his man. But instead, he sees a fireball of the stricken bird slamming into
Oh, that's brutal.
a hillside.
Does anyone see a shoot?
No.
Every pilot
Too low. Far too low.
hopes someone else responds
And
for
too
the yes,
fast.
but the silence is deafening.
Negative, sir.
Fury fills Edwinson's heart.
Copy.
The US planes roar over the Serbian mountains. Suddenly, the ground drops below them, revealing a huge valley with an airfield. It looks just like the target area as was described in their mission briefing. Seconds later, Edwinson sees exactly what he expects: a long line of trucks and tanks going north on the road to Belgrade. There's never a shadow of doubt in his mind. This is their chance for revenge.
There are those sons of... Blue flight, get that German convoy. Red and yellow to the airfield. Yes, sir.
The Soviets are unaware that they've been misidentified by the Americans. The
Blue on blue. Yeah. This was a interesting time. I gave people to make the joke about the A-10 Warthog with the blue and blue incident with the Challenger tank, too. There's such things as fog of war, but also when you're doing just visual targeting from analog, especially from analog targeting systems, or especially just visual only. I guess maybe the A-10 doesn't have as much excuse as compared to the P-38s here, but there's a certain degree of understanding on the parts of the pilots that this could be misconstrued if they're solely relying off navigation alone, especially with a rapidly changing battlefield, which was the eastern front of Central Europe, or the Balkans, especially.
Red Army and Yugoslav partisans are celebrating the anniversary of the October Revolution. They drive along, soldiers singing and Soviet flags flying proud in the air, until the rumble of an engine interrupts the melody. The soldiers look up to the sky and see the P-38s flying in the distance. Seeing their ally brings a smile to their face. Celebrations resume and the convoy...
Oh, I am too. I forgot the Americans and Soviets were allies. Yeah, begrudging allies, if you have to remind yourself. Let's say begrudging despite the Lend-Lease program and how pretty much, even by admittance of Joseph Stalin, the monster that he is, he still admitted that they won the war solely due to the American Lend-Lease program. Russia on its own could not have survived or kept up the capabilities if it was not for the American Lend-Lease program to sustain them for both food, rations, materials, equipment, you name it. People here know my thoughts on the Soviet Union, and especially about communism, because they have directly affected and killed, basically, leaving my family of my original size of my family's clan from that area, from that end of my family spectrum. There's only about a quarter of us left than there was before communism, because they did slaughter and starve that much of us out. A lot of Ukrainians would also feel the way too, because it was around the Holodomor area, but even though we weren't technically Holodomor, most of my family was lost to the Holodomor. And then, of course, the slaughter by the Russians. It's a long story, but basically my thoughts on communism is more than just the typical oorah stuff that you'd probably see Nick or a lot of, like, the Fat Electrician, those guys talk about, because for me it's a lot more personal. There's a lot less credence to give peaceful conversation to communists, and it's more so on my end. The way communists want to LARP about capitalists or certain people, especially with the intersectional communists that get racial with it, let's just say the feeling's mutual towards them for the most part. Because there's no olive branch between me and bastards that have slaughtered my family. I know it's weird to hold grudges for family I've never met, but if everyone wants to play a gung-ho about shit that's happened hundreds of years ago that never affected them or their family lineage, then fuck me, I'm gonna get gung-ho about it too. For sure that directly affected me. I'm sure a lot of Cubans, because I do know some Cubans, feel the same way about fucking Fidel Castro and the Soviets. And I do know there are plenty of Vietnamese I do know who escaped during the fall of Saigon who feel that same way too. And any sympathizer, they feel that same vendetta against, especially like someone like Jane Fonda. But that's Jane Fonda's not my is not my hatchet to bury. That's someone else's hatchet to bury.
Marches on. Few are alarmed as they see aircraft break formation and turn straight towards them.
Нет, они на штурмовку идут.
The lightnings bear down upon the column, the roar of engines getting louder. The few Soviet soldiers that realize the mistake scramble to warn the incoming Americans. They grab flags from their comrades and lift them higher, waving them desperately, hoping the Americans see. But there's not enough time. The pilots don't notice, and they pull the trigger. The Soviets are cut down as bullets tear through the formation of men and vehicles. The column is thrown into a frantic panic under a storm of lead. Then the American bombs rain down. Explosions blast through what remains of the convoy, inflicting heavy casualties.
Yep.
At the nearby airfield, the distant blasts are heard. Lookouts stand in attention and see a swarm of aircraft headed straight towards them.
Батарея, к бою!
The alert sounds, and Soviet soldiers rush for the anti-air guns. They come to life with a furious roar, with tracers flying out from the sky to meet.
But I want to make it very clear about my previous random communism, and this because it's going to go in for the VOD too. The men on the ground here, once again, I've spoken about this too. Despite how much my hatred is especially towards the Soviet Union, because it's what they did to my family, I have no ill will to any Russians or Ukrainians, because, quite frankly, I grew up with Russians and Ukrainians too. There's not a slight bit of ill will, and then when I read stories from the war, compared to what the propaganda of the Soviet Union portrayed them as, when you hear the actual personal stories of those that were able to make it past the fall of the Berlin Wall, I do enjoy hearing the stories because they're still stories of individuals in a tough situation making do with what they can, and that is truly something to give credence to, credit to, better words to say it. If not just credit, outright respect as well. There's no lack of respect on my end to that type of soldier. It's to a lot of the beasts of the war that were unleashed upon Europe, and you can talk about the rape of the women and girls of Europe that happened during the Soviet onslaught. But when I come down to like individual stories like this one here, example, I can feel that pang of empathy or sympathy and a pang of not exactly grieving, but with of that empathy towards the men that are being in this blue and blue situation of an unfortunate event that came from the Trafalgar War.
Their incoming attackers. In the air, Edwinson leads his men down towards what they believe to be a Luftwaffe airfield full of Bf-109s. Anti-aircraft fire sweeps through their formation, striking the planes, but they're undeterred. 20mm shells and 50 caliber bullets pour from the Lightning's powerful armament. They smash into the earth, ripping across the rows of parked aircraft as they hear enemy fire striking their own birds with a crackle.
Pull up!
The Lightnings pull out of the dive, but one of them fails to follow. It's Second Lieutenant Alden Coulson. He yanks on the yoke with all his strength.
Oh
He's
boy.
taken severe damage from the Soviet guns. He flies much lower than expected, attracting the fire of the entirety of the Soviet airfield's anti-aircraft defense.
She's not coming up!
More impacts strike the Lightning. Wings and elevators rip to shreds, and control slips from his grasp. The P-38 crashes a kilometer from the airfield, exploding, with Coulson inside. Edwinson sees the balls of flame, and his anger once again rises.
Only more fuel to the fire.
They're gonna make the Germans pay.
Build some altitude and go in again.
Down below, anti-aircraft fire continues skyward at what they believe to be German twin-boom FW-189.
And there's the thing with FW-189s. The max speed of these aircraft is 214 miles per hour. That's at the peak performance, peak altitude for this type of speed. The 189 was actually considered a prize to the Soviets because on the Western Front, it wasn't very common to see 189s. They were very common on the Eastern Front as reconnaissance aircraft, and they were considered a prize because despite their low speed, they were incredibly good handling aircraft. And the Soviets in particular, it was also because the visibility, as you can see from the rear canopy here on the gondola, so the rear gondola, is that the amount of visibility the rear reconnaissance had, it basically made them a formidable, formidable for keeping an eye out for any enemy fighters. And especially during the early war, when the Soviets aviation industry was far, far behind compared to the Germans, these things would outrun and out evade Soviet pilots, so they were a prized kill for any Soviet ace to pick up. Also, you can see here from the Argus engines too, these things flew with French motors, because when the downfall of France, that actually led to a couple German aircraft, because Germany was always in short supply of engines for their aircraft. That was one of the problems besides the supply manufacturer of raw material, they were always in short supply of material for engines outright. And machining and have the time to build new engines. So when they got a hold of French factories, the Argus engines would go into aircraft such as the FW-189, but there was also another type of French engine that was put into the Henschel 129, which is kind of a predecessor to the very heavy ground support aircraft we have nowadays. That was one that infamously had the tank cannon mounted underneath the belly on the underside of the fuselage as a staple. It was basically the 50mm tank anti-tank gun they basically mounted up to an aircraft. It was kind of like a predecessor to a heavy support ground unit aircraft. But all these machine guns are forward firing. Also, something to do is that what I'm also getting, because again, it was before the Americans too was fog of war, so the Soviets fog of war. But there's some things that also would pick these guys that should aware these pilots and the ground crew, but they're also trying to defend themselves from attackers. That these aren't 189s, because 189s, the shape you can see here is far different from the outline is far different from the P-38, but also the speed these things are going at, because the P-38 turns slow at low speeds, at low altitude, but it's still got a far faster rate of speed than the 189 would have it at this altitude. So they would have been very confused. So this would have been a dead giveaway that these are not 189s, but then again, when during fog of war, some things just don't come to light.
Red Army pilots rushed to the remaining Yaks through fire and smoke. The first two Yak-9s to stir to life.
I love Yak-9s. And also, the Yak-9 was a fucking formidable aircraft, too. It was very late when it came into play, but it was hyper formidable when the Soviets finally got out to where I will give some credit to the Soviets where it's due. The Yak-9 is something to behold of a aircraft, but it was also very lightly armored too, and it had very low armor, as you can see.
Piloted by Lieutenant Krivanogich and his wingman, Junior Lieutenant Shipulia. As they taxi, Krivanogich looks up and sees the fighters turning back for another attack. They line up on the runway and smash the throttle to full. The Yak-9s roar down the runway and lift off into the air, with a terrifying sight of the incoming enemies looming overhead. The two Soviets skim the treetops, racing away from the P-38 sights. But behind them, the rest of the Soviet pilots are not so lucky.
Nope.
They take off in a large group. Easy targets for a squadron that have already lost 2 men.
Get those planes before they gain altitude.
His men don't question. They dive in at maximum speed, peppered by anti-air fire streaming from the ground. With the crosshairs on target, they pull the triggers. Bullets and shells tear through the Soviet planes. One Yak is immediately destroyed and several others are damaged. They break into evasive maneuvers as
especially like this is the prime time to knock down targets on the taxi, because it's just not sheer traffic on the runway. During any time of wartime operation in this era, this is the best time to take down planes. This is why we also get certain kills, especially during takeoff times, is especially when you really want to go for trick shots on the enemies, because famously we know about the story about the F-15 or F-18 that scored that bomb to helicopter kill in the Iraq War, where they basically put a 500-pound bomb through a helicopter to down it for shits and giggles. I mean, that's the time when you pull some whack-ass shit on pilots, but once again, it's the most vulnerable time you can get an aircraft. Basically, it's catching someone with their pants down in bed, right? It's when they're still waking up and getting up to get going. That's when you really catch them with their guard down.
lightning soar overhead. all except one. One of the pilots sees his attacker pulling out of the dive and spots an opportunity. In a split second, he pulls his yak upward and pulls the trigger. P-38 flies straight through his burst and is ripped to shreds. The P-38 bursts into flames and spins violently out of control. The pilot inside is Second Lieutenant Philip Brewer, and he has no opportunity to get out. He's trapped, and his plane plummets to the earth, crashing to the northeast of the Soviet airfield.
Yeah.
The P-38s gain altitude, escaping the grasp of the anti-air gunners. Edwinson looks down where one enemy and two friendlies burn. This is becoming a much tougher fight than he expected.
A lot of fighters incoming. Make a defensive circle. We're shooting our way out.
Meanwhile, Krivonogic and Shipulia race low over the trees, accelerating to well over 400 kilometers an hour. The attack on the rest of their squadron has left them isolated, but they watch the enemy fighters opening fire on the helpless column, and they know they have no choice. The pair of Yak-9s pull up into a steep vertical climb. For the first time in history, fighters of the United States and Soviet Union will face off in all-out air-to-air combat. Shipulia races in pursuit, sweeping in at high speed and opens fire with a single 20mm cannon and 50 caliber machine gun. His bursts land on one of the P-38's twin fuselages, but it doesn't take it down. Shipulia soars by at blistering speeds and turns away to prepare for another run. But the American pilot requests backup, and two circling P-38s come to his rescue. Krivonogic spots the enemies diving upon his wingman, and he shouts over the radio. It's just at the nick of time. Shipulia pulls hard in the last second, escaping the P-38's lethal burst. He twists and dodges the enemy.
It's pretty, I mean, honestly, on both ends, it's a tight fit. It's both really fast aircraft, different rates of agility and different levels of firepower, but shit, it's a hairball.
Aircraft,
especially on the deck too, when there's no way to get out. If you slip up, you can't bail at this altitude.
Guns, but he's on the back foot.
And at these speeds.
Krivonogic flies into the scene as fast as he can, his heart thumping with every burst of tracers launched towards his wingman. He's coming in fast. His crosshairs line up with one of the two lightnings, and he pulls the trigger. His gunshots streak across the sky and narrowly miss the enemy's aircraft. The American pilot immediately abandons the attack, but Krivonogic ignores him. He moves on to the next P-38, hounding Shipulia, takes aim, and opens fire. His rounds are perfectly placed and hit the Lightning's twin booms, bursting the aircraft into flame. It flies on, out of control. The American pilot opens the canopy and bails, and his burning plane crashes 8 kilometers to the north.
So at least we got one out
of the Soviet airfield.
At least one lives of the down lightnings.
Both brace for an onslaught. They're horribly outnumbered. But then, the rest of the Soviet squadron burst onto the scene, opening fire and scattering their enemies. Krivonogic is relieved. Victory is now within reach. The two pilots rush into the fight again, but in the chaos of battle, they get split up. Krivonogic sets his sights on an enemy and chases him through the melee, spiraling upwards through the air. The P-38 does the same, but the P-38 is not optimized for low-altitude flying, and Krivonogic quickly catches up. He has the American in his sights. On the ground, a Soviet anti-air crew are firing at every enemy target they see. Whether it was just bad aim or an over-enthusiastic gun crew, we'll never know. But they send a volley directly at Krivonogic's yak. He gets no warning. His yak is struck directly and disintegrates.
Shit. That is terrible. Terrible fucking luck on that end. Shit. I'm not gonna make a joke on that one. That's horrible luck. To pop your own pilot out of the sky like that, just by sheer bad luck, like goddamn.
Tries to raise his friend on the radio and sees the burning wreck plummeting down to the ground. His friend is gone. He shakes the loss from his mind and spots an American target underneath him. He's outnumbered, and now, without his friend, but he still dives back into the fight. P-38s swarm around him. One of them performs a steep climb, stalls, and then opens fire. Shibuya has no chance. He flies on straight through its fire, and he's shot down. The burning wreck of his plane crashes 500 meters north of the airfield he was defending.
Damn.
Soviet losses mount.
Well,
Another yak is shot down by the Americans.
Yeah, it's now becoming a slaughter against the Soviets again, where they're getting popped out with the sky by the Americans.
Soviet forces are desperately contacting every...
That's also the thing too, is that the Soviets also had the philosophy where... Same philosophy as the Japanese and Germans, where they kept their best on the front lines as long as possible, rather than take their best home, pulling them out of conflict to be the trainers for new upcoming pilots. While the Americans did that, just very much that, and the British and Royal Canadian Air Force did the same thing too, and Australian Air Force as well. Gotta give credence to pretty much all the Commonwealth. They practically followed the same footsteps. Most of the majority of allies did the same methodology, where they pulled their best pilots out of combat to train upcoming air crews to become better pilots. So basically, getting a roster of great pilots and have then have one super ace that gets killed in the heat of battle. The Soviets, you can see with a lot of them now, is that these are inexperienced pilots. So granted, a lot of Soviet aces did survive the war too, but there's also a lot of inexperienced pilots up here. So when it comes to going against Americans opposed to just new, wet behind the ear German pilots, they're getting fucking slaughtered.
Nearby base, hoping for reinforcements. Rushing to the scene is a fresh group of Yak-3 fighters led by Captain Alexander Koldunov. They're responding to the airfield commander's desperate plea for...
The Yak-3, so a less powerful aircraft than the Yak-9, but pretty strong in its own right too.
But Koldunov is unsure of what he'll find. He's been told he's fighting German FW-189s, but he knows the 189 is a reconnaissance aircraft. It's not used for attacks like this.
Exactly.
Something is very wrong.
But comrade, that capitalist idea, yeah, exactly. Also, Alexander here is actually, I believe he was one of the ace pilots that did survive the war, so he basically got good at recognizing his targets before he'd make attacks on them.
Approaching the battle, he sees what is before him is not an FW-189. That is the unmistakable shape of an American P-38. He quickly abandons his attack and roars alongside the Americans, wagging his wings, hoping the Allied pilots see the red stars. But instead, the lightning slows, gets behind, and turns to fire. Koldunov breaks into evasive maneuvers and escapes the furious volley. He once again flies straight through the maelstrom, trying to capture the attention of the American pilots, but it doesn't work until he flies right alongside Edwinson.
Yep.
Edwinson sees the Soviet plane, and his eyes go wide. A cold sense of dread travels down his spine. He looks around at the other aircraft zipping by around him, every single one of the so-called enemies sporting the red Soviet stars.
Yep. Yep.
Cease fire! Cease fire! They're Soviets! Everyone back to base now! Repeat, everyone back to base now!
All of the P-38s turn west and flee the scene, but they're chased by the Yaks. One by one, each Soviet pilot turns back to their base.
That's gonna be a hard thing to let go, especially considering how many of their friends they got lost and how many people were slaughtered because of this event. The fog of war. That'd be a hard sell to any pilot, because especially when you get your adrenaline pumped up like this is fucking hard to do.
And the terrible accident comes to an abrupt end. The incident was taken by some on Soviet high,
Resulting in the loss of 31 lives on the Soviet side, 28 soldiers killed in action, Lieutenant General Grigory Kotov killed in action, 2 pilots, Dmitry Krogovanov and Viktor Shipulya.
command to have been a deliberate act.
36 were wounded, including pilot Junior Lieutenant Anatoly Zetovsky. It also claimed the life of Yugoslavia person who was traveling.
At the moment, the fallout of the incident threatened to spiral out of control. But the US admitted the mistake.
2 US pilots lost their lives that day.
In an
Second Lieutenant Eldon E. Coulson, and Second Lieutenant Philip Brewer.
explanatory letter to the Soviets that set out the chain of events as to why the Americans thought they were fighting the Germans. A Soviet account, although likely embellished, was released over.
U.S. pilot shot down near the train, survived, and was rescued by Yugoslav partisans and returned to the Allied lines.
For years.
Good.
American information on the incident is
This fellow who bailed in the air was secretly interrogated and handed over to the British
very
intelligence.
scarce, and many believe that the full account of the incident has been kept secret and remains classified until 100 years after the event.
Probably.
Check out this film to see how the first step.
I mean, it took how long for us to recognize, and even though it happened in post of this, the Korean War between the Tomcats, to awarding that old pilot the Medal of Honor very recently. That's... Cases like these are hard and tricky to get around, these blue and blue incidents. Okay, let's do another one. I'm blowing Yarn Hub right now. Let's see what we can do. What other Yarn Hub video shall we watch? You want to watch something a bit more modern from Yarn Hub with the Nighthawks, or do you want to watch like we're gonna probably do the Bosnian War one, so we can either do Nighthawk, or we can do the one where the Eagles ate sparrows for breakfast. Because I'm feeling frisky with some Cold War action here, or some Yugoslav action. You know what I'm saying? Japanese experiment. You want to watch Count Dankula about Unit 731? Sure, Shalamau. Count Dankula Unit 731. Let's go. Remember, the 21st night of September.
Wake up, child.
So before we get here, I'm gonna go get myself a little drinky poo, a little LaCroix, and I'll be right back, okay? Oh. Daddy's back with his little drinky poo. Dad's back with the beer. He's got himself a good little LaCroix. And this time he didn't have to beat his stepdaughter into getting him the drink. Isn't that wonderful? But now we get to watch... is this the right one? The Prison with a 0% survival rate. Unit 731. By Count Dankula.
Wake up, child.
So, you ready for a fun time, boys? Ready for hell or high water?
Your acceptance letter just came back, and congratulations, you've been accepted into one of the most prestigious institutions in Asia. What's that? You didn't actually sign up for it? Well, that's the neat part. Here at our academy, we pick you. And trust me when I say that there is no school like this one. We pride our...
Wait a minute. This ain't Unit 731. Oh, fuck. This is the Cambodia one. No, okay, this isn't 731. Let's go to Wendigoon's video.
When discussing humanity's history,
the most disturbing human experiment. The most disturbing human experiment ever, Unit 731, by Wendigoon. Throw the baby in the cold water, see how long he survives, it's for knowledge. I still find it funny, we figured out that the human body was made up of 70%, there we go, I'm back. That the human body was made up of 70% water because we basically made human jerky out of people at 731. Well, the Japanese made human jerky out of people at 731. Horribly disturbing, but that's how it is.
When discussing humanity's history and tales from our past, it's often comforting to look at those stories through a lens of superiority. After all, in the modern age, people have more information and are more connected to each other than they ever have been before. So
it's why we can look at something like the Plague Doctor in such a weird, whimsical light of both macabre and interest, because it was woefully ill-prepared proof of concept, but it equally was to a sign of the time's technological knowledge for bioweapons and basically, not bioweapons, like fighting bio-warfare, essentially, against a disease. It's ripping across the nation.
when we look back at tragedies and atrocities that people have committed, it's easy to apply a label of ignorance and just say that they weren't in the same position that we are now, so it makes sense that they did the things they did. But regardless of any label or explanation that you could come up with, it's hard to justify the evils of Unit 731. Unit 731 was officially a public health department within Japan during World War II. Although now we know, as the years have revealed, Unit 731 was in actuality perhaps the most disturbing case of human experimentation ever. The actions that Unit 731 did for the perseverance of a country and an idea is hard to imagine any person doing for whatever selfish.
See, 731 also too, I mean, it was known for a while, but it's especially in the modern zeitgeist has become prevalent with more spread across there. Now, there was some misinformation that they don't teach the atrocities of the war to the Japanese because Japanese school kids are being taught about the history of the Sino War for the past good little while. It's not completely in the dark. It just depends on which area they come from. But it's because people feel like they haven't been beaten down as the Germans have, or the Germans still flog themselves to this day, which they shouldn't be doing. But also you gotta remind yourself equally too, and it's just my personal opinion as well, is that when 731 came to light, and what we know about it came to light, did anyone take a notice that all of a sudden more documentation or more historical documentaries and movies were made about the Holocaust? Because it just seemingly out of nowhere, when we had a case that could theoretically, as possibly in comparison, be worse than Mengele. Not saying Mengele was any better, because Mengele's a fucking monster too. All of a sudden, we just had to make more stuff that just seemed too far flung of sadism just to sell the narrative that something was always worse than 731. It's just, I just seemingly noticed that. Call me conspiracy theorist all you want. It just seemed to be like that, where we couldn't just have a case of something. Both things are horrible, but because it took the light off something, we have to then go back in time and then we have to kind of go back and then write more stuff of what we found that gives ammunition to people who may not believe, or who may question the outright existence of said crime against humanity. Right? It's where you start making fan fiction or fantasy of things that people willingly believe that it just outright didn't happen. And in doing it to outpace another very horrible experiment to keep yours in the zeitgeist of public conscience, you begin to notice this occur. And it's not, I mean, you can actually there are cases of Jews outright saying that, like, some of the stuff that's being written about the Holocaust nowadays is just too far flung in some cases, because it is made to essentially it's basically to try and overshadow any other thing that happens down the line by just going back and writing more stuff and then writing more stuff. Kind of like how you can write more passages into the Quran or the Bible in post afterwards. Ooh, let's just make edits and canonizations here and there. It just becomes noticeable over time. And that gives credence to people who actually deny the whole thing existing. And I'm going on a weird tangent here, but I'm just giving this example of why something like 731 in public conscience recently has become very, very popular, because it was something that for the longest time no one really knew existed, because it was constantly getting buried by both Japanese, American, and by forces or by ideological forces outside of the witch. But as it's come to light, it's exploded in popularity of public knowledge and in the public conscience.
reason, much less the entire efforts of a military and government. So today, we're going to talk about the history and tragedy of Unit 731, as well as the incredible injustice that befell everything in the end. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention that while I am going to be careful with my language and not be too explicit with some of my wording or details, the topics we're going to be broaching still relate to intense violence against women, children, prisoners of war, civilians, and all manner of executions, both standard and barbaric. And while I do think it's important to talk about these things, not only for the victims who were destroyed by this tragedy, but also so that the evils that were done by man are never forgotten lest they be repeated, and while I think all that's important, I also want to say that if you are sensitive to these topics, it's not worth your own health and mentality. So again, if this video is something that you don't want to deal with, or if some of the topics that I briefly mentioned are too intense, feel free to click off now. And also, for those who are sticking around, the video is going to be a bummer. There's not a lot of jokes or fun to be had with this one. Like I said, I think it's important to talk about, but it's just going to be sad and a lot. And I can't wait to get done filming this so that I don't have to think about it anymore, and I can just push all this trauma onto you all. Before we get into that, and it's just, you know, sad for the next half hour, however long this video is, why not do something a little...
It's going to be brutal, outright. Now, this was a viewer request on Unit 731. I go into these videos and I've not watched Windigoon's video on it. I have watched Windigoon's other videos on other things he's carried. No joke, I can fix it. Ain't kidding, I ain't heartless. But what I'm saying is, I know quite a bit of 731, of what they did. It's very brutal. The uncandid, and Windigoon said he's going to be censorious on some things to keep some people sanity, but I have read on the uncensored documents of 731, and it is, yeah. Let me just say, when it comes to Sino-Asia, Southeast Asia, shit that goes down there, especially, will horrify you. If you know what things were done in Cambodia, yeah. They have trees there.
Another flawless victory for Hyperborean space stoners.
Hey, Aeon. Hey, Aeon. Thanks. Welcome to Agartha, man. But as I was saying, though, is that one of the stories I recall was of in Cambodia, there was a tree they had that seemed innocuous, but it has placards on it because those were the trees that they would take newborn infants and smash their heads against as punishment to the mothers for failing to meet a quota, or supposedly going against the party of Pol Pot in Cambodia. That's just a light touch on things that have gone down in parts, and that's Cambodia. We're not talking about Laos. We're not even talking about the Sino-Japanese War. This subject is on the Sino-Japanese War. Unit 731 in particular has some very, 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 very brutal cases. And it's a subject matter that can get very dark and touchy. So, I get whatever Windigoon has. I will make jokes as much as I can on dark subjects, but Windigoon is going to mention some things here that are, as he's mentioned, he's not going to the full nitty-gritty like I know. If he brings up certain words, I will remember the cases. And I can try making jokes as much as I can, but equally too, it's also to soften the punch. Because it's going to be dark. Just a bit of
quirky, a little weird right now to kind of lighten the mood a bit. Like, I don't know, maybe I could try to radicalize my audience. So with that out of the way, let's get into something that really matters. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. But do you know what hasn't been a disaster? Raid Shadow Legends!
Thanks, playa.
Raid is back and better than ever because now they're bringing the new animated limited
Thank you, Windigoon. Thanks for bringing the hype back.
series, Raid Call of the Arbiter. a series that you can watch for free in-game right now. The first episode is out now. It revolves around the character of Gaelic, and from the animation to the character arcs that they're building, they really use the fantasy setting for all it's worth. The series is really shaping up to be something special. New episodes will be coming out every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time up until July the 20th, and again, it's totally free to watch with Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is also releasing behind the scenes and lore
Dropped out for a bit. When did one of you get
YouTube
raided?
channel. Meaning right now,
This was some time back, but this is the video about Union 731.
the world of Raid is expanding in a way that it never has
So,
before. Like,
yeah.
for example,
Giving some
in-game,
warning, it's gonna get dark.
you can now dig in
So,
character
Wendy
bios.
Goon's trying to keep it light with the ad read.
From champions that feature in the show like Gaelic, Aethel, Kale, and Elhain, to the fan favorites like Death Knight and Skill of the Drakes and more. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of Raid or you've never played it before, because for every player across the board, now is the perfect time to get in on the action. Everyone will get a chance to get Artak, one of the 5 new characters from the show, as a playable legendary champion for free just by logging into Raid for 7 days between now and July 24th. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, then use my QR code or link in the description to get started now. Because with it, you'll get insane bonuses like the epic champion Knight Errant. And if you see me in-game at Wendigoon OG, feel free to join my clan.
I like this guy's content, but this legit looks so ass. I mean, it's Raid Shadow Legends, right? Once again, we can say this. I don't know who's playing Raid. It could be about 1,000,001 different... It could be 1 billion Chinese people playing Raid Shadow Legends, kind of very topical for the video. But it could be 1 billion Chinese people just randomly gotcha slopping their way through Raid Shadow Legends. I don't fucking care. All I know is Raid basically kept YouTubers alive during the 3rd and 4th adpocalypse, funded how many YouTubers I've liked during those times, like the holdouts of edgy and more free-willed content, not even just trying to be edgy YouTubers, like people who just want to have free-willed content, basically kept them afloat and going. So I will give kudos to Raid on that part, but their game-wise, I'm not interested.
As a storyteller, it means a lot to
It helped
see the
Dank
world of
live.
Raid
Yeah,
expanding in this
helped Dank
way.
live. It helped Dank live. It's helped Kirsha. It's helped It's a Gundam. It's helped. I mean, you can fucking unfortunately, and I'm saying this in post. I used to like them back when. It helped Friday Night Tights and Geeks and Gamers. Helped out Clownfish TV. Helped out a lot of pundit YouTubers back when. Helped out a lot of smaller VTubers back in the earlier days of VTubing and indie VTubing. It helped out a lot of people that are. It helped McNasty and the Goons. It helped out a bunch of people. Like it kept a lot more creative content alive.
And hopefully you enjoy it at least half as much as I do. Again, if you're interested, scan the QR code or go to the link in the description to get Raid today. Thank you all so much for watching the ad, and thank you so much to Raid for sponsoring the video. It really does mean the most. Hope you all check them out. QR code and link in the description, and we are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. So the history of Japanese warfare and the Japanese government that led up to the creation of Unit 731 is pretty extensive, but I want to keep it to what's relevant to the events of World War II. To set the stage, in 1925, the Geneva Convention banned the use of biological...
I think my issue with them was mainly I wish the game was better. Yeah, it just seems like kind of slop to me personally, but that's just me.
and chemical weapons. This was done because during World War I, one of the most brutal parts of trench warfare was the use of chemical weapons.
And that's what I found interesting too, and this is me going on a quick history tangent. You're gonna hear me do this a lot throughout videos, and yeah, I'm very known for doing this. Fritz Haber, the one that was half of the Haber-Bosch alliance, which helped make ammonium nitrate for fertilizer, basically fed the world. Was one of the men who basically fed the world over for renewable farming and to help basically put an end to Europe's natural famines. Unfortunately, enforced famines would happen because of Soviets and retarded communism. But hey, Fritz Haber decided that for his effort to the German war effort, he would help try to use his chemistry to try and end the war quicker to save lives. In doing so, he developed chlorine gas as a weapon that would be both brutally effective and also a shock and awe and horror that would basically be a terror weapon to shut down the war to stop it forthwith. Of course, we know how that went. Fritz Halber, despite winning the Nobel Peace Prize, no one would attend or congratulate him for his award, and his own wife would end up killing herself by a shotgun wound to the chest because of the guilt in her conscience, profiteering and living in luxury at the hands of a weapon. Fritz Halber would die eventually, but his company would continue to live on. And unfortunately, despite doing a lot of good to keep Germany alive during the Weimar Republic, Halber's legacy would be tainted once more by an unfortunate concoction by his company. Not by him himself, but by his company. Fritz Halber's company, their firm, would end up making a little pesticide that was used as an insecticide against crops. And this pesticide was called Zyklon B. Take a guess what Zyklon B was used for. Yeah. So even with the weapons of horror, there are still men behind them, and those men didn't always have the darkest intentions. In fact, there was men that were considered either saints of their time, but equal to sinners of pride and of hopeful, of somewhat of a hopeful pessimism, in a way. Best way I can put it. But yeah, he would, his company would end up producing Zyklon B at the end of it all.
And while this treaty deterred several nations from using it altogether, not every nation was in agreement with the Geneva Convention, one of these being Imperial Japan. Now, as you're going to see in a moment, Imperial Japan was not one to shy away from brutality. And as it related to chemical and biological weapons, them being banned didn't mean they weren't going to use them, it just meant they were going to be very careful about how they use them. And during the 1930s, Japanese researchers began to dig into the possibilities of biological warfare.
Now to pause again, another historical part is that we know from the Second World War that in combat and during bombing raids, chemical warfare was not used, thankfully. Though, not to say the alternative was much better concerned with the firebombing, but chemical warfare was not used during the war. In the massive bombing raids. Some isolated cases, but very, 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 very few, and that was mainly in combat situations. At this time, too, mass production of respirators became to such a degree because of the horrors of the First World War that pretty much it would have been null and void for most respiratory-based attacked chemical weapons. But in preparation for this, every citizen of the UK and Germany and pretty much most nations found in the conflict were issued en masse gas mask equipment. But exactly there was a question though, is that when you have cities, kids don't want to wear their mask, right? The kids wouldn't want to wear the respirator because it would be tight-fitting, uncomfortable, and kind of creepy. So, in response to this, to help keep a company that was struggling to make money alive during the stages of the war, even before America joined up, licensing and branding by the Walt Disney Corporation was taken to build a respirator system, a gas mask, to basically keep morale up and to keep kids happy. And what they built was something that's more nightmarish and basically had the opposite effect. And I'm going to show you what it looked like, because they have these in museums. And this shit is nightmare feel inducing. So, hey, Shar, if you're still here, you want to see this? The Mickey Mouse gas mask. This is what they gave to families so kids would feel at ease during the bombing raids, because if they saw Mickey Mouse, they would feel happy. Yeah. They have these museums. This is fucking terrifying. Jesus Christ. It's got some form of creepy novelty to it, but I don't. Yeah. Yeah.
Make sure we're all on the same page. By biological warfare in this context, I'm referring to things like weaponizing diseases or using infection.
But biowarfare was a different breed than chemical warfare, of course, as he's mentioning here, because this was still a concept being developed in the interwar and late First World War.
As a battle implement. The issue with this was, or at least the issue from the Japanese government's perspective, is it's hard to test the feasibility or practicality of biological weapons if you don't have a population or group of people to test said weapons on. Also during the 1930s, Japan began to attack the mainland of China. At this time in history, China was really struggling to reach the modern age, at least.
More than that, China, the Republic of China, wasn't per se exactly a republic, more so it was a collective of different territories and states, all kind of ran by different governments and warlords. The actual republic based in its capital, which was not Beijing, surprisingly. I mean, the original capital, I believe, was even Hong Kong, because Hong Kong was underneath British rule at that point. Republic of China capital. Just remember this here, because I have to get my facts straight, right? The actual, prior to Beijing, the actual Republic of China's capital was Wuhan for about a year, Chongqing, from 1938 to 1926, Nanking was the de facto capital from 1920 to 1949 during this period. Or the de jure capital this time, not the de facto. So, kind of at this time period, it was a kind of a collective. He is right. China was far behind the rest of the world. Still kind of not really are nowadays, but equally they aren't as advanced as they claim to be. Especially if you get to the outskirts of China, there's a lot of older settlements that are off the grid.
Technologically, and a lot of their defensive forces were made up of small communities and bands of soldiers.
Yep.
Whereas, in opposition to them, Japan had an incredibly strong military force.
And Japan's military force, because people like to mention Japan's rapid militarization and modernization was at the hands of the Americans, basically threatening Japan to get in shape. However, a lot of their doctrine, discipline, training, equipment came at the hands of the British, because the British, the Anglo-Japanese pact signed prior to World War I actually kept Japan up on modernization, doctrine, and discipline. And actually, that's the reason why Japan also has incorporated a lot of European tastes in their modernized culture, even post-war. And that's why a lot of their engineers also went to England post-war for automotive engineering and training, for different forms of engineering training for building, and pretty much a lot of infrastructures, because their prior connections to England had kept strong ties even post-war, and a lot of architecture and design was based off the British Empire of old. So Japan's rapid modernization was really at the hands of assistance through both their own will and discipline, but blending it with both the Americans giving them the boot to go and also helping them out with some modernization, but mainly the British assisting them in that part with hopes for good trade.
So
which did work for a while until the Americans basically pressured the Anglos, the British, into disbanding the pact, and that kind of led to Japan going on their own, and also America trying to snuff out any more future empires, and that led down to Japan deciding to go imperial, and kind of led to a domino effect into what happened.
conquest of China is called a conquest because the Chinese would try to put up the best fight they could, but would just keep getting destroyed
It was a
by the
steamroll.
Japanese government at every turn. So we see all these pieces moving on the board. Japan is interested in biological and chemical warfare, and they're starting to make headway into the Chinese mainland. And again, this is all like a decade before World War II would even begin. Around this time, the Japanese Surgeon General named Shiro Ishii came forward and said that Japan needs to make headway into biological warfare because everyone could tell a war was on the horizon, and if Japan doesn't get to it first, then one of the other powers, like the United States, might beat them to it. The Japanese government, being in agreement at this concept of a biological arms race, in 1932 appointed Ishii as the head of the Army Epidemic Prevention Research Laboratory. Publicly, the purpose of this laboratory was to investigate cures for illnesses and diseases that could befall a military force, when in actuality, they were trying to find new ways to make illness befall a military force. This group also had a division within part of the Japanese-controlled area of China. The unit there in China was known as the Togo Unit and was a part of this biological warfare initiative. Something
Yeah, here we go.
else to keep in mind whenever we talk about this.
Racial supremacy. The Japanese did believe in racial supremacy too, and that they were the master race of Asia. That kind of goes in hand.
So at this point in history, Imperial Japan was especially prejudiced against anything that wasn't Imperial Japan. A lot of the ideas that were made manifest through these experiments and Japan's actions in World War II come from a cultural sense of superiority. As a matter of fact, a superiority that's so strong, it justifies taking over and controlling everyone else. Because of that, several members of the Japanese government and military saw anyone who opposed them as less than human, or at least less than Japanese. And if you'll remember what I mentioned earlier, it's hard to test biological weapons without test subjects. So the Togo unit decided early on that the perfect way to test these new weapons and ideas was with residents of mainland China. Initially, this research was carried out at a location known as the Zongma Fortress. The fortress was an old castle-like structure that was built in Manchuria, China, and was repurposed for the Togo unit's needs. The early experiments at the Zongma Fortress typically consisted of bringing in civilians from mainland China and throwing them in the various rooms of the fortress that were converted into prison cells. Inside of these cells, initially, the subjects would be fed well and kept up to good health, and then at that point,
you want them to get up to standards of a military, of your average military man, or the supposed average of a Japanese civilian at the time. Though at home, the home front, there was a lot more starvation than there was. Cooking with Max Miller actually goes into detail about that. That's actually a good channel. I kind of like how he Tasting History with Max Miller, I believe his name is. It's a great channel. I would recommend you guys to watch. He did one about Japanese home front cooking during different eras of the war. But essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to fatten them up to be of the average supposed Japanese civilian, if not soldier, and you can get a general ground zero for health issues from a in shape and healthy test subject.
The experimentation could begin. Taking these now healthy test subjects, the researchers would then do things like slowly bleed them out over the course of several days, or dehydrate or starve them to see what the effects of the body would be and how long the subject could survive. Again, this was all done in the name of better understanding the limits of the human body. During the course of these tests, they would also be subjected to various diseases like the bubonic plague, and at various stages of infection, the subjects would be vivisected, or a live dissection,
Damn.
most often while the subject was still conscious. This was done to see firsthand what the effects of certain diseases do to someone's internal system. These experiments would pale in comparison to what this group of researchers would go on to do. Things were kind of tenuous at the Zongma Fortress. Again, at this point, it's a group of researchers, not soldiers, who are doing this, And while a part of the Japanese government, it isn't a one-to-one with the Japanese military. So because of that, there were a few accidents that occurred at the facility. In 1934, there was a prison break, and a bunch of the prisoners escaped out into the Chinese countryside. In 1935, there was an explosion, and a large part of the fortress was burnt. But in spite of these incidents, the Japanese government liked the concept of these new means of warfare. So in 1936, the Japanese government gave them more funding and more access to military reserves, which not only included a lot of money, but things like Japanese soldiers for guard duty, or Japanese prisoners for experimentation. When Shiro Ishii's group, which again at the time all of this was referred to as the Army Epidemic Prevention Research Laboratory, whenever that group was brought into the Japanese government, it was renamed by Hirohito as the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. So
Yep. Obfuscation. Obfuscation.
again, a word to imply to the public that the group's entire purpose is to make sure that everyone's safe. It was at this point that Ishii's group was officially given the designation of Unit 731. The group then focused all of their efforts into China because, again, that's where most of the test subjects were coming from. But instead of going back to the Zongma Fortress, they now went to a brand new Japanese military research facility. This facility was a massive complex that had over 150 buildings and encompassed over 2 square miles. One of
Good lord. I think is that also a landing strip too?
the fascinating things to note about the structure of the building is there was this large welcome center or area that supposedly anyone who enters the complex has
It's a main pavilion.
to go through, but that was actually a fake building that was just done for publicity purposes, because in actuality there was an underground tunnel that they would shuttle prisoners in and out of outside of the public view. So not only was the name and purpose of the facility a lie, but the actual structure and some of the buildings of the facility were a lie as well, as the majority of experiments took place in these underground tunnels and cells. Now, into the late 30s, as Japan began to take over more of China, there were other facilities that began to pop up that were also a part of Unit 731, but the primary experiments and travesties that happened took place at this large facility located near Pingfang. And by
Because if you know, during the they call the rape of Nanking for a reason, but the Japanese had a philosophy of the 3 alls: burn all, loot all, kill all. That was the 3 all program they had operating for the Sino-War. And Nanking in particular, I mean, they call it the rape of Nanking for good reason. Count Tankula, and we'll probably watch the video afterward, but I know he did a video on it, but there was a case of a actual sporting match between Japanese soldiers over who could behead the most, or who could reach a tally number, or the most in a couple days, who could behead the most Chinese prisoners. Yeah. Shit that was isolated to the Dirlewanger Brigade on the Eastern Front was commonplace during Nanking and the Sino-Japanese War, Second Sino-Japanese War.
1939, Unit 731 consisted of over 10,000 individuals. Now, not all of these 10,000 members were a part of human experimentation. You gotta understand, Unit 731 is encompassing the way diseases could be treated, how diseases may be made manifest, and a lot of the experiments that were happening at these other facilities might have been legitimate or had some purpose other than torture. But as far as the events that happened at the primary facility we talked about, those were all pretty evil. The excuse for this large facility as to why they bring in so many Chinese prisoners and exist out here in the middle of the woods away from public eyes is that they were a part of lumber production. So the code name given to experiments that had to do with human experimentation was called Maruta, because Maruta is Japanese for logs. And it was kind of an in-joke in the facility that instead of referring to the prisoners and subjects as prisoners and subjects, they would be called logs. For example, how many logs were cut down today? Or do the logs look healthy? This whole
I know this video was made a couple years ago, and I've mentioned before, I've known about the Epstein shit since I was in high school, so that's over nearly a decade now. But isn't it funny how we keep going back to using code words in documentation? Or how sick individuals will use code words in documentation as a way to hint, hint, wink, wink, both covertly but conspicuously refer with just enough obfuscation of their heinous actions.
The whole code word thing would keep up through a lot of Unit 731's research. For example, several of the researchers who performed the experiments on prisoners firsthand would publish their findings, but they would publish them saying that it was a long-tailed primate that they did it to, or in some instances even referring to these subjects as Manchurian monkeys. Again, the Japanese government knew.
God damn, that's... I can see where, oh boy. I can see where, then I've gotten the inspiration for Frieza. Hello, monkeys! I'm sorry, that's a little fucked up to say, but I can see where they got the inspiration for Frieza on that one.
What was happening, but the rest of the world didn't, and the Japanese government would prefer to keep it that way. A lot of the numbers vary, considering several researchers probably came and went during the height of World War II whenever these experiments were at their worst, but at least one point, Unit 731 had about 300 researchers as a part of the Maruta or human experiments at this primary facility. So what kind of experiments were happening here at this primary facility of Unit 731 that I have been trying to put off talking about and talking about all the other aspects of it so I don't have to get to it. And why is it regarded by many to be the worst example of human experimentation, or by some, the worst example of government action against a population ever? So I guess I need to talk about that now. And
here we
this
go.
is your final warning. Click off if you don't want to hear about it, and I don't blame you. So let's start with how the prisoners got to the facility.
Just going all gas, no brakes.
In the first place. As mentioned, the majority of the subjects were people from the Chinese mainland. While the majority of these were Chinese people, there were also several Russians and Mongolians and Koreans who were captured as well as several Japanese political prisoners who were transferred to the facility as well. They would be transported to the front of the facility in a vehicle that had no windows, so that if there ever was an escape or if they were ever let out for whatever reason, they couldn't testify where the facility is even located. And then once they got to the facility, they were bagged and taken to the aforementioned underground tunnels. From there, they were placed into an underground cell. Most of them on their way in would be given a vaccine for their own health upon entry, when in actuality they were being injected with various diseases, and the disease would change based on whatever study the researchers were currently carrying out. Exactly.
Yeah. In a mad scientist twisted horrible way, this is like a fucking paradise.
Estimates of how many people were taken prisoner are kind of nebulous. On the most conservative end of the spectrum, it's about 3,000, but that number could be as high as 30 or 40,000 people who were actually taken to the facility. However many the true number might be, no one ever survived the Unit 731 experiments. The reason no one's sure how many died in the first place, and it took so long for this information to come out, is because no one that ever walked into that building ever walked back out. So what happened to these prisoners? Well, the thing I mentioned that happened at the Togo facility, the stuff about them being made healthy just so they could be bled out and dehydrated, that was still happening, but that was the least of the prisoners' worries. The average lifespan of a
Time to make human jerky.
prisoner at Unit 731 was about 2 months.
Yep.
If you were lucky, then you were killed quickly in one of the conventional weapon experiments. These experiments were exactly
that's luck on your side.
what they sound like. They would take several of the prisoners and place them in a courtyard. One of the things they would do is they would place people in rings at various distances from each other and then throw a hand grenade in the middle to see what lethality the grenade had out to these different rings of people. They would set people on fire with flamethrowers and see how long it took them to burn up. They would line up people in a straight row and then shoot them with rifles and pistols to see the penetration capability. They would sharpen blades.
So imagine Brandon Herrera. Well, not really Brandon Herrera, because we're in for Congress now. Imagine Kentucky Ballistics or Demolition Ranch or fucking. Just imagine that, but yeah, but with Japanese during the Sino-Japanese War, that would be an AI video and a half right there.
Weapons to various degrees to see how sharp a knife needed to be to fully cut.
Listen, I gotta make light of this. This shit can get really fucked up really quickly, and it's gonna get really fucked up.
Somebody, and of course, as mentioned, this was all done to participants who were fully awake and conscious of the death they experienced. And again, that's if you were lucky. If you were unlucky, then you were a part of the disease trials. So the disease trials were similar to the things mentioned in the Togo unit, where they would infect people with things like the plague and then dissect them while they're alive to see the various stages of infection within the body. But they had been doing the bubonic plague research for years at this point. Again, the time period we're talking about now is generally like 1940, 1941. So the plague research has moved on to much larger demographics. Again, a lot of the records of Unit 731 were destroyed at the end of the war, but from what we know, there was at least 12 field tests of things like the bubonic plague, and 11 of them took place in Chinese cities. So Unit 731 researchers would deposit plague-infected fleas into the middle of a Chinese populace or infect their wells and homes with things like typhoid. And then these researchers would watch from a distance and then walk through these decayed cities in their sterile garbs, recording the number of casualties. At the very least, tens of thousands of people died immediately from these large-scale weapon tests. Entire recording the number of casualties. At
Jesus Christ.
the very least, tens of thousands of people died immediately from these large-scale weapon tests. Entire countrysides of people were destroyed by infected fleas that were simply thrown out in a clay pot. Back at the facility, the feasibility of chemical and biological weapons was being tested as well. They would have prisoners stand out in fields wearing different layers of protection, from completely naked,
Good lord, they really got these guys stood up for this job.
to normal clothes, to gas masks and what have you. And then they would just bombard them with things like mustard gas or sulfur gas and see how long it takes them to die at whatever stage of protection they're in. Another thing that the researchers were interested in was weaponizing venereal diseases. So to do this, they purposefully infected a bunch of people with STDs. However, the injections of the STDs tended to not take properly, so as an alternative, male and female prisoners were led into cells and then at gunpoint
Forced to copulate.
forced to transfer the diseases. And as mentioned previously, at various stages of the disease's progression, the individual would be vivisected to see what it's doing to the body. And even all of that is within the realm of feasibility. As evil, as depraved, as monstrous as it is, you can wrap your head around the concept of, okay, well, if someone really, really believed that the people they were torturing aren't really people, and that this is all for the greater good, you can see a purpose, to them at least, they can see a purpose at the end of the tunnel as to why they're doing this, right? Well, that's before we get into what I can only describe as Machiavellian torture methods. Because sure, they're wanting to use new diseases in the war, so they gotta test those, right? But some of the other stuff they did was simply no other explanation than depravity, or at least none other than I can think of.
No.
So to just read off a few of the things that happened at Unit 731, and again, these are things that records were not destroyed of, and people would later confess to. So if it's possible, it is very likely that worse stuff than this happened as well. People were cut open while alive and had various organs removed before they were stitched back up to just see what would happen. So for example, cutting out someone's lower GI tract to see how long it takes them to die from that, taking out someone's stomach and attaching their gut to their throat to see what that does. People had their limbs cut off, in some cases to visualize how long it took for someone to bleed out, but in other cases, They would saw off both arms and then switch the shoulder that the arm was attached to just to see if the body could reattach it. People were placed inside of low pressure chambers and the pressure cranked up to see how long it took for things like their eyes to fly out or their chest to implode. People were hung upside down by ropes tied to their ankles to see how long it took them to die from blood pressure to the head. People had very large and heavy objects like crates and rocks dropped on them to see how much force it took to kill someone from being crushed. People were placed
Lord.
inside of centrifuges and the speed ramped up until they were dead to see how much G-force it took to kill someone. And as depressing as it is, I should also mention the fact that they determined that children had a lower tolerance to it than adults.
Oh my god.
People were given intravenous injections of things like horse blood and seawater, again, just to see what would happen. People had their limbs placed in very cold buckets of water until their limbs were removed, and according to researchers, it felt and sounded as if it was wood, and then the limb would either be crushed to see what the damage of a frozen limb that becomes injured might be. They were set on fire to see if anything could be recovered from that. They tested various ways to warm someone back up after they were frozen to that degree. According to Ishii himself, again the lead researcher, they did various experiments where they took babies that were under a month old and placed them in freezing water and freezing elements just to see how long it took them.
Bush on confused, like, of course the dude would die, but why test it? So, we know we've established that they don't see the Chinese as people. We can understand this. But I suppose the reason why, in a macabre, roundabout way, which for no good reason for it happening, but understanding if that miracles could be performed to recover and save someone from a critical point of damage. Or to understand the physiological damage being done to the body to determine cause of death for autopsies and reports. Those are the only two reasons I can come up with. They're both reasons that we use nowadays in our current medical journals to understand things, but equally too, the way of determining this was, well, grotesque and of nothing credence of a doctor's moral code.
To die of hypothermia. I'm going to read this next one from an excerpt from Hal Gold. He wrote a book called Japan's Infamous Unit 731, which is a book breaking down this whole topic. And Hal says in one portion, it was said that a small number of these poor men, women, and children who became Marudas were also mummified alive in total dehydration experiments. They sweated themselves to death.
So that small number of these poor men, women, children being sweated themselves to death under the heat of several hot, dry fans. At death, of course, would only weigh 1/5 normal body weight.
Under the heat of several hot, dry fans. At death, the corpses would weigh only about 1/5 of their normal body weight. And in some cases, they would just decapitate people and take notes about it. It really is bizarre the level of insanity this entails. Like, not only is it evil, but it's also so dumb, right? Like, if you just cut someone's head off, what are you even studying?
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, of course it's evil. I'm not saying obviously that any of it was better than the others, but when a military tests a weapon, as evil as it is, you could think to yourself, okay, I understand why they did that, but some of these things, just like mummifying people, shattering their frozen limbs, leaving babies out to die, like, it's a strange debauchery. There's all these stories we hear about that, like when Rome fell, there were these big swinger parties and everyone would get high until they were dead, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And a similar thing happened at the end of World War II in places like Nazi Germany. It's like they were like rapping on the gates of death, just going to go out in a blaze of glory. But this was a group of scientists who did it for a couple decades. Like...
Okay, hang on. What the fuck's going on with my PC? So, I guess in a lack of better words, Thank you. They did it for, this can sound crass, the love of the game, if you will. A sadistic, twisted, but love of the game.
How, or at least the intensity of it for 5 years, right? Like, we don't even have the excuse that they were about to die, or they thought they were just going to bust hell wide open. Like, it was just a continuous, thought out evil with seemingly no purpose that was signed off by members of governments, military, and the scientific community.
Exactly.
That's what makes it so terrifying. Perhaps the worst fate of anyone in Unit 731, or I'll say definitely the worst fate, was of the pregnancy studies. So as mentioned, the average lifespan of someone in Unit 731 was about 2 months. That number is skewed a bit because a lot of people who got there were killed within the first week, and things like the weapon testing. The reason that the average comes out to 2 months is because several of the studies were women who were, similar to the STDs, forcefully impregnated by either another prisoner at gunpoint or by one of the guards themselves.
Right.
Similar to the other diseases, a lot of them were dissected while alive at various points in their pregnancy just so they could look at how the fetus was developing. And in other cases, the women were effectively used as a breeding stock so that the researchers could have a fresh batch of infants for
Holy shit.
several of their tests, like the hypothermia test as mentioned earlier. And you know what gets me about it? Like, I've looked at so many disturbing things. As a matter of fact, I knew a lot about Unit 731 because I covered it on the disturbing movie Iceberg. There's a film that I should have looked up before I started recording. There's 2 of them. There's Philosophy of a Knife, which I talked about in the disturbing movie
Holy
Iceberg,
shit.
and Men Behind the Sun. Both of them go into graphic
God created heaven, man created hell. These could be a good horror movies, like disturbing movies to watch.
detail about what happened at Unit 731. So I had seen those, so I'm like, wow, I already knew that, you know, the Japanese government did all of these evil things to these people. And I, you know, knew about the Frozen trials, knew about the chemical weapon trials, even things like the pregnancy experiments. So like, I knew all of that going into research for this. But the part that threw me off, that I wasn't expecting that I would see, actually, believe it or not, came from Wikipedia. Typically, Wikipedia is a horrible source to get information from because people can just change stuff, and sometimes they just flat out make it up. But whenever I was brushing up for this, I decided I'd look at Wikipedia to see how they had it laid out. And they had an account that I hadn't read anywhere before that kind of stopped me in my tracks. There's at least one recorded instance of friendly social interaction between prisoners.
Unit 731 staff. Technician Naokata Ishibashi interacted with 2 female prisoners. One prisoner was a 21-year-old Chinese woman. Other was a Soviet girl, 19 years of age. Ishibashi asked her where she came from, and she learned she was from Ukraine. The two prisoners told Ishibashi they'd not seen their faces in the mirror since they captured and begged them to get one. Ishibashi snapped a mirror, then through a hole in the
Unit 731 staff. Technician Naokota Ishibashi interacted with 2 female prisoners. One prisoner was a 21-year-old Chinese woman, the other a Soviet girl who was 19 years of age. Ishibashi asked where she came from and learned that she was from Ukraine. The 2 prisoners told Ishibashi that they had not seen their faces in a mirror since being captured and begged him to get one. Ishibashi sneaked a mirror to them through a hole in the cell door. And that bothers me so much more than a lot of the other information I read. And the reason for that is because, again, I'm pretty desensitized to just brutality, right? Like the number of historical stories I read about that has to do with people getting, you know, skinned alive or, you know, brutal executions. Like that's just history, right? It's bloody.
There's a lot of accounts you can go through that you become desensitized to it, but when it comes to such a volume and the insanity of it all, this, for example, it becomes 9-year impossible to ignore.
Brutal. Evil's always existed. But
It's
as I mentioned
interrupt.
at the beginning of the video, it is a lot easier to throw a label of ignorance on top of everything, right? Like, we take it for granted in the modern age because everyone's hyper connected by the internet, right? Like what you're watching this video on right now. And it's really easy for us to take human connection for granted. To just say, well, of course, I know that this other group of people is of equal worth as myself because I talk to them. I know several of them. I experience it. And it's easy to go in with that mindset and look at history and be like, oh, well, yeah, I could see how the Imperial Japanese would, be so tricked by their government because they just weren't as educated. They weren't as enlightened as we were, right?
No,
so it's easier to read stories about things like Unit 731 if you kind of turn your brain off and you're like, this was a group of people who just didn't see the others as human, and that's why these tragedies were allowed to happen. But then I read the story of a guard who saw two girls, young women, who wanted to remember what they looked like. And he recognized that they needed to feel something, that they needed to have that. So he broke rules and snuck them a mirror. And it made me cold. Because then it's not just a person who let themselves get tricked and convinced themselves that they were dealing with cattle, right? Even... Which, if these experiments were done with animals, I think we'd all still agree that it's evil and terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe that was his mindset, right? That he's just dealing with animals.
But because he's able to recognize they're human, that gives a horrible credence that they knew they weren't desensitizing themselves to what they were doing.
But to read that he took pity on a girl who two girls who wanted to remember what they look like terrified me, because at least some of them were fully aware that these people were suffering and that was wrong.
Right.
Not just that they were suffering and this was for the greater good, but that they were suffering and something should be done. And in spite of that, it kept happening. It was such a powerful force of government and people and the greater good that these tragedies kept going on, and the people who participated were well aware of the pain they were inflicting and didn't stop it. And that is so much worse than a group of people who were just following their orders and turned off their ears.
Exactly.
This guy still had ears, he was still listening, and he kept following those orders.
I mean, what can you say?
Along that same note of kind of the illusion of us versus them fading, there was one, I believe he was a guard there. Some said guard, some said he was like a research assistant. Someone who wasn't a high-ranking researcher named Yoshio Sudo, who got infected with the plague while he was there because, everyone's dealing with these volatile diseases, so one of the workers gets infected. So they cut that guy open.
Yeah.
Like, I guess they figured, well, he's a test subject now, we're not going to let him go to waste. Who cares if he's Japanese? And they sliced him open too. It's interesting, while kind of the...
It's a ruthless, desensitized depravity that that exists. Just to look at it as like, oh, he's dead, or he's not dead. He's got something. Let's find out, everybody. Like, fuck me, man. Cannibalistic to their own kind.
The Japanese government's idea was, well, we're more important than they are, so they can suffer. But we see these glimpses of the Japanese who are infected being treated the same as everyone else who's infected, and also the Japanese recognizing that these people have emotions and feelings, and it makes the situation so much more scary in the end. And I think one of the reasons it is so scary is because, again, we read a lot of stories like this, and it's comforting to think, oh, well, if they just knew better, right? Like,
right.
Oh, well, maybe if they didn't have to struggle for resources as much, or maybe if they were allowed to experience humanity from this other side that they seem to hate so much, maybe then, they wouldn't have had to do the awful things they did, right? It's easier to read a lot of history that way. But you see instances like that, and it's dreadful, the idea that, sure, they had all that. it didn't change anything. Near
No.
the end of World War II, the Japanese government got desperate and decided to rely on Unit 731 for some kind of drastic measure against the United States. So, using the bubonic plague research that the Japanese had figured out, again by testing it on residents of China, the Japanese government put together a plan called Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night. The plan for this was to release the bubonic plague on San Francisco, and the attack was scheduled to take place on September the 22nd of 1945.
Okay, so I know about this one because this goes in hand with another project the Japanese did. So the Japan also had developed both an aircraft and a submarine to go in tandem with this operation. And what Wendigoon failed to mention, and I understand he's not mentioning it for the sake of believability of the story, is that this was connected to the KI-400 class submarine. For those not aware, KI-400 class is considered to be the only known fully operational, though there was proof of concept prior to the Japanese. They're the first fully produced and operational and only recorded carrier submarine, meaning that they carried aircraft inside them as a strike unit and could also operate as a submarine. I mean, the KI-400s are absolutely massive. Fucking massive submarines. They all were destroyed post-war by the Americans to prevent them from falling into Soviet hands or intel being shared, because this was a pretty, not really advanced, but more so the engineering was a proof of concept that they didn't want the Soviets to get any ideas from. The KI-400 had a aircraft in it, a float plane dive bomber called the Siron, or the Saron bombers. They were specifically designed for the KI-400. I believe only 15 were built. 3 for spare and 4 for the operational submarines. The Saron dive bombers were meant to carry both incendiary bombs for San Francisco, conventional bombs, and laid out here the bubonic plague to spread into San Francisco and California and Los Angeles. That's the level we're talking here. Thankfully, though, the Saron and KI-400s were also, while they could maintain themselves at sea for long periods of time, they also were too large to not evade capture or sinking. So, thankfully, it was prevented, and they were mainly put on patrol missions to try to retake back Okinawa or operate as strike forces to fuck with the American supply lines, but in the end, they ultimately failed outright. I guess a blessing in disguise.
But this plan never came to fruition because just over a month before September 22nd, America dropped the atomic bombs on Japan and ended the war. In these final days of the war, the members of Unit 731 realized that the war courts would not err in their favor and decided to destroy whatever evidence they could. And of course, this evidence began with the prisoners, who were forced to either ingest poison or be shot before the facility itself was set on fire and most of the documents and research destroyed. And as mentioned, no one who ever entered Unit 731 as a prisoner ever walked out. When Douglas MacArthur came to Japan after the war was over, he immediately heard whispers of things like human experimentation. After tracking down Ishii and the other leaders of Unit 731...
Imagine if it succeeded. If Japan, instead of the bubonic plague, had dropped airborne AIDS over San Francisco, they would have made modern San Francisco 70 years ago. There you go, a little rim shot.
Confessed that some degree of human experimentation took place, but wouldn't give MacArthur specific details.
Right.
MacArthur threatened that if the remnants of 731 don't comply with the United States, then the United States would allow the Russians to judge the members of Unit 731. And I don't know if you know this.
Oh, that would be a fun time.
But especially right after World War II, you much wanted to be in a United States tribunal than a Russian tribunal, because Americans typically ended with prison sentences and Russians ended with rope. So a deal was struck between MacArthur and the head researchers of Unit 731 that said if the researchers of 731 turned over all of their data to the United States, then they would be given full immunity. And of course, both sides agreed to that deal. Now, a couple things. The reason this deal was done is because, one, and most importantly, America was afraid of what might happen if the Russians, who shortly after World War II began the Cold War and all of that, or the Cold War began between the United States and Russia, I should say.
Right.
America was afraid of what would happen if the Russians got their hand on all of that information. So it was more so done not so America could have biological weapons. I mean, we're not dropping plagues on populated cities, at least. That's what they want you to think.
The Tuskegee experiment would beg to differ. So a small country, smaller than Germany and Russia, was the closest to strike a blow in the actual U.S. soil back then. Considering, in terms of the American outreach, Japan was the only nation to that point to strike on U.S. soil, and it wouldn't happen again until 2001 for another strike on U.S. soil to occur. Yeah. They got jiggy with it.
But really, it wasn't so much that we could have the information as much as we didn't want the Russians to have the information. And the other reason that the deal was taken is because, not really that I think it would have changed anything, but most of the details of what happened weren't known until decades after World War II ended. Like most of the stuff I read about came out in confessions in the 70s and 80s. And while MacArthur knew that there was some level of human experimentation, I mean, the data he was handed talked about how long it took for the researchers to witness someone dying of hypothermia, right? Like, he couldn't have been totally dumb to it, but at least the brutality and methods of it, they probably weren't aware of at the time. Not that I think that would have...
And that modern strike had suspicious circumstances around it. Oh, we have gone through that earlier on, as you know. Yeah. A lot of questionable things around September 11th, 2001.
Stop them from it, but maybe they wouldn't have given full immunity. Maybe I just like to think they wouldn't have given them full immunity if they knew the full extent, but whatever, it still happened. Now keep in mind, to the public at that time, none of this had ever happened. To the Japanese government, to the Chinese, Unit 731 was a crazy conspiracy theory if you thought anything weird was happening out there, because it's just for public health and lumber for some reason. So whenever the immunity deal was made, part of the deal was that America would keep up the lie that nothing ever happened at Unit 731, and all of the members of Unit 731 could change their name, and America wouldn't release their identities to the public. So after America makes this whole plea deal with them, eventually Russia shows up, and they actually have a trial for some of the members of Unit 731, and as you can imagine, didn't care to consult the US over it. So Russia holds a trial, and they end up getting 12 people who they can confirm were in Unit 731, and the sentences for those 12 who were found guilty were 2 to 25 years in a labor camp, of which the most any of them served was 7 years. Now, if you know anything about Russian history with war crimes, the idea that these men weren't shot or hanged is absurd.
Yeah.
Especially that they ended up just serving 2 to 7 years, respectively for different people. That is insane. How did that happen? Well, if you'll remember, the American deal with the Russians wasn't made official until like the 80s, and some researchers we're going to talk about, put in the work and made it come to be. So the fact that the Russians show up, they talk to the Japanese for a while, and only a few of the 731 researchers get like 5 years in prison, it is pretty much guaranteed that the Russians made a deal with the Japanese very similar to the deal America made with them.
Pretty much.
So at the end of the
I get everyone likes to rag on the U.S. for Operation Paperclip. Oh, you helped Nazis, you helped Werner von Braun escape, despite Werner von Braun really advancing the knowledge that we had for the space race. You know, all the shit they'll throw the Americans and possibly the British for too, though the Brits are also the biggest offenders of the paperclip sword over America's head. The Russians primarily did a lot of paperclip shit because remember, Stalin purged majority of the aeronautical designers. So for Russia to get as advanced as they did in the space race and with their aircraft, they mostly relied on captured and dealed with German aeronautical engineers.
day, this group of people who were monstrous demons even committed a massive amount of bloodshed and misery, and then when the going got tough, they sold that bloodshed and misery to the highest bidder and got off scot-free. So ain't that a kick in the pants? Now again, none of this was public information, and it would have stayed that way if it wasn't for the work of various Japanese historians. See, again, Unit 731 for years was like a boogeyman. There would be a researcher come out in like the 60s or 70s talking about how the project was real or they were a part of it and they can attest to it. And they would get laughed off by the media, saying that they were just some crazy conspiracy theorist. Historians pulled...
Yeah. This is also why, because it was so far-fetched, and also the narrative around another event happened here was the main precedent of everyone's focus. Partially also strike a deal to keep a better relationship with the Japanese, but also you have to keep a narrative going sometimes that nothing else could portray this one biblical modern-day event that surpassed religious doomsdays, and that we've kind of made in 20th century, in the rise of atheism, we've kind of made the Second World War almost our biblical event, if you will, like a biblical, like our new religion, if you will.
Various records in Japan that supported the government's sanctioning of Unit 731. And in 1983, a historian published his findings and was told by the Japanese Board of Education that he should take those findings out of textbooks because it's not backed historically. So these historians went to the United States, and now, because everything's declassified, went through various records and found MacArthur's immunity deals and the records that he got directly from the Unit 731 experiments, and were able to bring those records back to Japan, show them to the Board of Education, and say, it's real, it's all right here. And from then on, the Japanese government slowly began to admit fault in the Unit 731 experiments. Through the 1990s, the Japanese government finally acknowledged that it was a real thing, but not the specifics of what the researchers actually did. The most recent development of Unit 731 was in 2018, when the Japanese government named the 3,607 researchers who were a part of the unit. And as you can imagine, between all 3,607 of those names, they're all either dead or have disappeared. Shiro
Pretty much.
Ishii, if you'll remember, the leader of all of Unit 731, died on October the 9th of 1959 from laryngeal cancer, never experiencing judgment on this side of eternity for his role in the Japanese war crimes. And Unit 731, like I said at the beginning of this video, is depressing. There's no two ways about it. There's no happy ending.
Nope.
There's no good side to it. It was a group of people.
You also gotta remember something too about Ishii and a couple of the other head researchers. Ishii became a pediatrician after the war. He was a child doctor. A couple of the guys became dentists. Imagine finding out your great-grandfather was one of the researchers. My brother in Christ, imagine you're finding out your family doctor who gave you checkups as a baby and a child authorized, if not led, did research on infants. That's what we're talking here.
Committed atrocities, and they got away with it, effectively. And there's no polish I can give that. But what I can give polish is that this story was almost entirely lost for history. If you were from World War II, from these events happening up until like 1984, when it finally became official, the people who died never died, at least publicly. Their names were just lost as some of the many names lost in World War II. And they were just a statistical anomaly because governments didn't want to acknowledge the atrocities that they had once condoned or that the forerunners before them had condoned. And of course, obviously, I don't mean any of my, critiques of the Japanese government during World War II to apply to now. But again, that was less than a century ago. It's hard to think about that humanity is capable of that kind of evil and that kind of justification for that kind of evil. But the point I want to bring out, the one light in all of it, I could say, is the people who would not be quiet. The people who kept learning, who kept digging, and now we have names of the perpetrators, and we have death of the victims. We have cause of the victims.
Right.
And while it doesn't make it right, and the suffering still happened, it gives some meaning to it. Their names are not simply lost; they were taken, and hopefully by understanding why they were taken and what great evil led to it, we can prevent tragedies like that from ever happening again. And like I said, Unit 731 is a heavy story. But it's one that I think should be told.
There are things that are going on in China that, right now as we speak, by their own government, there might be some equally bad things going on right now. Just giving you that heads up.
Not one I enjoy telling. I didn't have a good time recording this. I'll be honest.
No, it's a tough sell to do.
And I'm just a lowly YouTuber. I'm no one important. I'm no one special. But hopefully you got something out of this. Or at least you have more depressing knowledge to terrorize your friends with, which in that case, win-win. But either way, if you got something out of this, or you just like to be miserable like I do, I guess, that's cool. And I just want to say thank you for watching. Thank you all so much for sticking around and watching the video.
You know that's happening? Do you remember the Hong Kong protests of 2019? Did you ever see those videos of the boxcars? The cattle cars that were going past from Hong Kong to mainland China? And you could hear people screaming from the inside? You know about China's organ harvesting campaigns? From prisoners? There's probably worse shit going on right now.
I know I promised that the Ted Kaczynski video would be next.
I mean, you know for a fact it's
that
happening,
video
yes.
is becoming a much larger project with a lot of really cool things that I've never done before, and it's taking more time. So hopefully whenever it does come out, you all will be excited.
Oh, the Ted shed.
I hope you like that teaser in the ad, and hopefully that made the rest of this video not as depressing. But if you made it this far, I appreciate it, and I hope it wasn't that much of a bummer. And I want to emphasize, while I talk about a lot of...
It's hard not to be a bummer. I mean, Wendigoon's delivering the best we can. He's a great orator on this whole subject matter, but there's no way to slice it that can't be sliced, that it's really, really depressing.
The disturbing and worst parts of humanity, I am talking about the outliers. I am talking about the strange parts. Humanity, just as capable as it is for infinite evil, is capable of infinite good. And don't let yourself get, in a headspace about how terrible the world can be, but get in a space about how great it can be as well. I recently, I'll brag a little bit, my fiance Kayla just graduated with her doctoral. So she's a doctor now, and that's incredible, and I'm proud of her.
Oh, good for her.
And it helps seeing people like her, people who strive, people who have power and diligence and strength. And it really is easy to take your mind off the terrible when there's so much good to be found. So again, I hope it didn't get you that sad. And if I did, I'm sorry. But I hope that you enjoyed. Shorter video for now, but like I said, Ted on the way. There will probably be another video in between this one and the Ted one, because like I said, that's becoming a big one.
Ted shed.
Ted video in June, and hopefully you enjoyed that. But until then, I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, thank you, Wendigoon. Well, that was Unit 731. Yeah. Mosey on around here, see if I can either bring something up or we could call it. I don't know. I'm just gonna schmoozy on through, check around, see how we're doing. Twitch, we're doing well on Twitch. Okay, good there. How's our kick thweem doing? How the kick thweem? Kick doing wood? Yath, queen, flay. Stupid Twitch notifications. Back to Twitch. Let's see what's going on in the VTuber section.
By the same developer.
Shut up.
That is a true actual fact.
Shut the fuck up. Ugh. Game's done quick. Shut the fuck up. See what else. I have to go to sleep, so yeah, okay. And we might just call it. I'm gonna see who's streaming over on the VTuber section of Twitch. Get right into them. I appreciate you guys for coming out tonight. It was a good fun one. Let's see who we can go into. Raid. For VTubers. Viewership high to low. Okay. We can pass on you. Don't know you. And Shia, I'm not going near Shia Bun, not really interested. I know Mint Castella is streaming. I might as well just raid a Mint. I like her. I like my hag dog. She's in a Gyaru one. She's in her Gyaru uniform. That's cute. Here we go. We got Mint here. She's in her little Gyaru outfit. That's tight. I like that. All right.